Chapter 31. Magic Array. The little wizards who had spent their first weekend at school returned to class again. Almost everyone agreed that Professor Heimer was in a bad mood, and the first-year students who bore the brunt of it were the ones who bore the most anger. Recently, I heard a rumor in school. Toby walked slowly in the ancient magic classroom, his hair always hanging in front of his eyes and not slicked back. No one dares to look at the eyes hidden behind the hair. In just 1 week, the students understood that Professor Heimer was the most difficult person to mess with at this time. Whenever he passed by a student, that student would lower his head lower. Neither Neville, who had contact with him, nor Hermione, who was the editor, were no exception. Everyone knows that Professor Heimer is famous for being selfless and treats students from all colleges with the same attitude, especially during class. In his eyes, there is no difference between colleges, only the difference between good students and poor students. Toby seemed determined to pass by every student. He continued to say in a calm tone, "This rumor has something to do with me and the devil. I can only say that you may not know me well enough, nor do you fully understand ancient magic." He walked back to the desk and glanced at the lowered heads of the students one by one. "You will realize that I am much scarier than the devil." There was silence in the classroom, not even the sound of loud breathing. Now, everyone turned to page 7 of the textbook. Suddenly there was a series of sounds of turning books, and judging from the anxious movements of the students, everyone was worried that they would be the last. "From today on, you will officially learn ancient magic." Toby finally pushed his hair back and gave a smile that made the little wizards cringe. Magic Circle. This is an extremely partial category of magic. Only the Lost City at the bottom of Loch Ness has the most complete inheritance. Now, I am bringing this inheritance back to Hogwarts. I hope you can listen carefully to every section. Lesson, lest you turn yourself into a monster, or summon some monster inexplicably. Just when he finished speaking, one arm was raised high. Miss Granger. Professor, what do you mean by turning into a monster and summoning a monster? Excellent question. Toby said it as if he was waiting for someone to ask a question. This is the original purpose of the magic circle. It is similar to a summoning spell to conjure objects out of thin air. I noticed that there are many speculations that the city under the lake has become a ruin, but there is no lack of food. As we all know, due to the law of transformation, the transformation spell cannot directly transform food, but the magic circle can do it, but it is more accurately called summoning food. So you must draw each magic circle well during the learning process to avoid summoning any weird things. As wizards, you also need to pay attention to it. A failed magic circle may turn you into a monster, even if you are not within the scope of the magic circle. This is the danger of ancient magic, which requires precision and constant vigilance. The looks the students looked at him were frightening enough, but Toby felt it was not enough and needed to add fuel to this fear again. "How about I show you an example myself?" The students wanted to refuse, but no one dared to say this. At the same time, the magic ball melted and fell to the ground again. Fortunately, this time it only covered a small area near the podium and did not surround the entire classroom again. When another hexagram array flashed by, the small area completely changed its appearance and turned into that of the bottom of the lake. The shrunken Professor Heimer was swimming on the mudflat at the bottom of the lake, where a completely different path had been carved. The six-pointed star formation looks extremely complicated. Everyone stared at this scene with their eyes wide open. The magic circle began to work, and a dark and unknown light emerged from it. It looked very ominous, even a little evil. Immediately afterwards, a strange-shaped thing suddenly appeared in the open space. Its figure was blurry and shrouded in a light layer of fog, but even this looked scary enough. The body showed an irregular shape, and the lake was covered in an inexplicable red color. It stained red, like the product of a failed transformation that appears out of nowhere may also be deliberately created by a dark wizard and hidden in a certain corner of the world. Toby explained, this was a failed magic circle, and it summoned something extremely terrifying. Fortunately, I was at the bottom of Loch Ness and destroyed it with the largest horse-shaped water monster, otherwise something might have happened. What? As for the specific appearance of this monster, I deliberately blurred it out. At least it is on the same level as the illustrations in the forbidden books in the library, and it is not yet time for you to see it with your own eyes. Absolutely no one wants to watch this monster, and they don't understand why Professor Heimer would say the word watch so naturally. The magic ball returns and floats next to Toby. According to my speculation, if compared with magical animals, This monster is at least 5x dangerous level, the same as the fire dragon, so I think you all know what to do in the future. The students stared at him with pale faces, forgetting to even nod. For some reason, Harry thought of the picture of a cow with its entire body turned open. Although he had never actually seen it, he thought it should be as scary as the monster at the bottom of the lake. Fortunately, Toby's next words confirmed the reason why this course was chosen as a formal course. The magic circle is not so scary yet. At this stage, you don't have access to the content of the 6-pointed star array. Even if you want to imitate the mistakes I showed, you can't do it. Most spells can be realized with the 5-pointed star array, which is also the lowest level of magic. Array. Generally speaking, a magic circle is composed of a magic core, an outer array diagram, a magic guide, an outer magic ring, an outer magic text and other components. This is the same as casting a spell with a wand, which requires the correct wand gestures, magic spells, etc. Focus, and intention. What you need to do is to understand the magic circle and use the magic circle to describe the magic you learned in other classes. I have communicated with Professor Flitwick in advance. As a starting point for learning magic circle, the floating spell is a good one. Choose. This will also be your homework for this class. Draw the correct magic circle on the parchment, and then hand it in. When he said this, Toby suddenly paused. The students' hearts trembled. They saw Toby looking at them with a smile they absolutely didn't want to see. Any students who make mistakes in their homework will receive personal tutoring from me. At the beginning of the next class, I will also test whether you can draw the magic circle independently in class. If you can't, you will still receive personal tutoring from me. He immediately blocked the possibility of students plagiarizing their homework in the classroom test. All students who were cheating would immediately reveal their true colors. Crabbe and Galton suddenly looked embarrassed, and they looked at Draco for help. But Draco didn't dare to look at them. He had already received a reply from his father Lucius. Lucius told him not to mess with Professor Highmore under any circumstances. He dared to provoke the ancient curse himself. Litlin, even Lucius didn't expect that Toby was still alive. In the pale silence, another arm was raised high. Miss Granger. Professor, besides the 5-pointed star and the 6-pointed star, are there other levels of magic circles? For example, the 7-pointed star? Isn't 7 a magical number? Interesting idea. Toby praised. I have had the same confusion as you, but unfortunately, so far I have not been able to discover the existence of the 7-pointed star array, let alone what it is used for. Al on the flying carpet nodded solemnly, working hard to assume the responsibility of a teaching assistant. It didn't even look at the magic ball next to it, as if it didn't exist at all. Chapter 32. He is too much like a tyrant. At the dinner table, Ron took the pie and muttered, "A terrifying dictator, more terrifying than Snape and Professor McGonagall combined. Did you hear what he said about after-school tutoring? Then, what's the difference between confinement and confinement?" Harry quickly poked Ron with his finger. He looked left and right, and then whispered a warning, "Do you hope that this message will also reach Professor Hemmer's ears? He will definitely catch you and torture you." Emil. Ron immediately shuddered. Although Professor Highmore did not favor Slytherin students like Snape, he also did not favor students from other houses, let alone Gryffindor. He was the only one in class. He will have a good attitude towards Hermione, and this is all because Hermione is the student who loves to answer questions. Moreover, they also probably know that Professor Heimer is an extremely cautious person. If it were not for those rumors, there might not be such a thing as after-school tutoring. Then do you still dare to suspect that Professor Hamo is the thief? Why don't you dare? I'm even more sure now. Have you ever seen such a lawless professor? He took Snape out for a fight during class, and even beat Snape into such a miserable state. This is indeed worthy of celebration, but I said, if he is a thief, then let him be. As long as he doesn't lock me up, he can steal whatever he wants. Anyway, I don't have much money for him to steal. Troublemaking. Ron spoke the password, and the fat lady's portrait moved forward unsteadily, revealing a circular hole in the wall. They crawled in through the hole in the wall and came to the Gryffindor common room, preparing to write their homework on ancient magic with sad faces. But today there was a crowd of people gathered in the lounge. They stood in front of a notice posted. Ron stood on tiptoe and read. The first flying lesson will be held on the school playground this Thursday, and will be taught by Gryffindor and Slytherin. Oops. Harry said frustratedly, I don't want to make a fool of myself in front of Malfoy. It would be great if the person teaching the class was Professor Highmore. You miss Professor Heimer now? Ron asked with a strange look on his face. Because only he can control Malfoy. This is the only class where Malfoy doesn't dare to make trouble at all. Didn't you notice? He doesn't even dare to make fun of Hermione in the ancient magic class. It seems that this is really the case, but it makes sense. He dared to beat up even Snape, and even a student of Slytherin House. Malfoy just didn't want to be beaten. Hey! Didn't I hear you talking bad about Professor Heimer behind his back? George came out from nowhere, and Fred had the same smile on his face. You should know that Professor Heimer will. How can I teach you a lesson? Shut up! Ron said, adding, you are not allowed to tell. It's impossible to tell. It's a little difficult. Who made Professor Heimer so strict? There is also a mysterious magic circle. Harry suddenly remembered that they were both taking the same ancient magic course. Are you also learning magic circles? He asked. Of course. Fred said, I guess the content of the course at the beginning will be the same as yours, except for the final assignment. George then said, what we are going to use the magic circle to portray is a repair spell. To be honest, Fred and I have never seen such a magical magic. It is between the functions of magic spells and alchemy. It allows us to doing a lot of things. What's going on? Ron asked curiously. This has nothing to do with you. Poor freshman, think about how to deal with homework. We just saw that Marcus Flint was called to the office again. Cedric also followed. I dare say that boy must have bad intentions. He must have seen something. What is it? Harry couldn't help but ask, why do I feel that both of you admire Professor Heimer? Am I wrong? George and Fred smiled mysteriously. It's normal for freshmen not to see it. You can't imagine the prospects of the magic circle. At the same time, in the ancient magic office, Toby sat behind the desk with a serious face. Al sat on his shoulders, wearing half-moon glasses, and his eyes were even more serious than him. Opposite them, Marcus Flint, Cedric Diggory, and Hermione Granger sat respectively. Hermione had already received part of the first draft of the next textbook as she wished, and was busy flipping through it with her head down, not paying attention to the two people next to her. Marcus had a flattering smile on his face, but his heart was pounding. He couldn't help but wonder if Professor Highmore was really eyeing Slytherin's Quidditch team. He did tell Dean Snape about this matter, but Snape ignored him at all and did not plead for him. As for Cedric Diggory, he looked even more uneasy than Marcus, with guilt almost written on his face. Toby remembered that this student was a third-year student at Hufflepuff House. He performed well in class and could hardly find any mistakes. A piece of parchment with a twisted magic circle floated in front of Cedric. Mr. Diggory. After hearing Professor Heimer read his name, Cedric was startled and regretted his choice. Toby continued, I'm glad to see that you can turn in your homework faster than others, but in terms of quality, it's hard for me not to suspect that you deliberately made a mess of your homework to make it easier for you. Come to the office and receive personal coaching from me. Marcus looked at Cedric in shock. How could he be so stupid that he was even stupider than the troll? Explain it. Toby said, his eyes fixed on Cedric, and Al even took out a small shovel and patted it on his hand, as if he would make you look good without saying anything. Professor, Cedric looked hesitantly at the small shovel in Al's hand. He was a little unsure whether the other person would really punish students corporally. But he didn't want to lie anymore, so he said sincerely, I realized the prospects of the magic circle, so I came up with such a bad idea. Before this, I had never seen a form of magic that could be stored until I learned about the magic circle. It is not like a magic wand, which requires immediate casting of spells. Instead, you can prepare it in advance, and then just use the wand to activate the magic circle. On the other hand, the magic circle is not as complicated as alchemy, so it can be considered a magic circle. It's the best alternative, somewhere between wand casting and alchemy. I really don't want to miss this opportunity, Professor. This is a brand new magic system. It has broad prospects in the future and will even bring new changes to the entire magic world. However, I still noticed that the magic system will. It is very difficult to completely convert the curse into the form of a magic circle, and it takes time to study, so I volunteered to come to you. He cautiously raised his head and glanced at Professor Hamo, only to find that the other person was looking at him with a smile. And from the tone of his voice, it seemed like he had a truly friendly smile. "Yes, Mr. Diggory," Toby praised, "this is one of the reasons why I will take the magic circle as the first course to teach, because it has broad prospects and is more complex than a simple form of spells, which will help you better understand future courses." Marcus had no idea what the two people were talking about. Hermione couldn't help but look at Cedric twice, and at the same time, she felt a little annoyed in her heart. Why didn't she think of a brand new magic system? However, as a freshman who has not been in class for a long time, it is difficult for Hermione to understand the various forms of magic. It is expected that she did not expect it. But Cedric is different. He is a third-year student and has already had a deep understanding of magic. But besides these, Toby stared directly at Cedric, his eyes seeming to penetrate his heart. "Besides these, what else do you want?" Cedric's face suddenly turned red, and he subconsciously wanted to avoid his inner thoughts, but once again, he chose to reveal the truth. "Honor, honor, Professor," Cedric stammered and said, "I hope to get more honors. Hufflepuff House has always been looked down upon by others. I don't want to continue like this. I am eager to get honors so that Hufflepuff House will be looked down upon by more people. I want people to take it seriously and let everyone know that this is not a college where only unwanted students will come." Marcus despised Cedric's idea, but he didn't dare to show it. Al was staring at him intently, swinging the shovel faster and faster. Hermione looked at Cedric more often, but she still refused to admit defeat and said in her heart, "Gryffindor is the best house." Toby didn't respond immediately, he pondered for a while. "I remember you are a third-year student. If we start from this year, you can still stay at Hogwarts for 5 years. Forward. What? Is my calculation wrong? Or do you plan to drop out of school early? Or maybe you won't survive until graduation. I must warn you that studying ancient magic is a very dangerous thing. Sometimes you are even embarrassed. All werewolves will give up halfway." "Wolf, werewolf? That's not what I meant, Professor. I know that taking on honor will inevitably face risks." "Honor, honor, no matter how important honor is, it is not as important as life. Don't mention this word in front of me again." Okay, Professor." Cedric was confused. Toby glanced at Hermione inadvertently. The little girl was stunned for a moment. She immediately hugged the first draft in her arms tightly and stared at Cedric warily. "Then let's do this," Toby looked back and said, "you will be Al's assistant from now on." "Al? Mr. S. assistant?" Cedric took a lot of effort to add the word Mr. "That's right, the assistant's assistant." Toby made his decision. "Do you agree, Mr. Diggory?" Cedric blinked, finally realizing what had happened. He had succeeded. "Of course, sir." He couldn't help but said in surprise. Al jumped off Toby's shoulder and stretched out a paw. Cedric shook hands quickly. "Oh, and Mr. Al. Fortunately, he took care of magical creatures as an elective course. When the next class comes, he will ask Professor Kettleben how to take care of the Niffler." Finally, Toby turned his attention to Marcus, who looked puzzled. "Is it Dean Snape you're looking for?" he asked calmly. "Is it you who filed the complaint against him?" Marcus was stunned, his mouth suddenly turned faster than his head, and he blurted out, "There is such a thing, but didn't you ask us to find the dean in the first place?" Toby didn't look at him anymore, but looked at Cedric. "As the assistant's assistant, you have your first task today, which is to teach Marcus to draw the magic circle of the floating spell. This is not important to you. It's not difficult." Then he looked at the stunned Marcus. "Don't tell me that you can do everything, and you are not allowed to bully Mr. Diggory with the excuse of being in a higher grade. I'm going to talk to Dean Sprout about the matter now. I hope to wait. You will have learned it when I come back. Otherwise, I will teach you personally." With cold sweat dripping down Marcus's forehead, Cedric took out the parchment and notes, preparing to complete today's first task perfectly. Hermione tried hard not to raise her head. She kept whispering warnings in her heart, "Don't mess with Professor Highmore, don't mess with Professor Highmore." Toby took Al out of the office and wandered slowly in the corridor. "Ah! You mean the Slug Club? It's really looking more and more like it. Of course, the premise is to get rid of Marcus Flint. I won't bring in the trolls." Chapter 33. Flying lessons are coming soon, and students are all nervous about it. As soon as Malfoy left the ancient magic class, he went around bragging about his flying skills and always complained that the first years were not eligible to join the Quidditch team, otherwise he would have been selected long ago. Don't listen to him. Ron comforted Harry, he is just talking nonsense, but it is true that I almost hit the glider. At that time, I was riding Charlie's broken broom. Oh, come on, Harry interrupted, you've said that 100 times. Almost all the new students were seizing the opportunity to show off their flying skills. Harry was extremely dissatisfied with this because he had never touched a broomstick. Although he didn't meet him often, Harry still noticed that Hermione, who had always been arrogant, seemed to be as nervous as him. After all, the ability to fly cannot be learned just by reading books. Once he saw Hermione holding a baby in her arms. There were words in this book, and the title aroused his interest: The Magic of Quidditch. Is this book useful? Harry asked casually. Soon, he regretted asking the question. Hermione kept talking for a long time, which made Harry tired. Only Neville would eagerly listen to every word Hermione said, hoping to use it in flying lessons. He had also never touched flying broom because his grandma wouldn't let him. It looks like you've memorized this book, Ron said as he passed by. I hope you can win points for Gryffindor in flying lessons. Hermione suddenly went crazy. Isn't it fun to say sarcastic words? Ron was frightened. He looked at the back of the figure who left angrily and said in shock, how did I offend her? After Hermione walked away, Harry whispered, don't you know that Hermione often runs to Professor Hammer's office recently? It is said to be related to some new textbooks. Anyway, I don't understand, but you don't want to think about her recent. It's all about who you stay with. Ron finally understood, and suddenly he said, no, aren't you worried that Hermione will become the next little thief? What little thief? Neville asked in confusion, and Professor Highmore is not as bad as you think. He is quite kind sometimes. Harry and Ron looked at Neville as if they didn't recognize him. Ron said regretfully, we haven't had flying lessons yet, why did you break your brain in advance? I'm serious. When it came time to get serious, Neville couldn't help but stutter. Then tell me more carefully. Harry asked curiously, when did he become friendly? Why haven't we seen him before? Neville didn't want to mention his parents, but he seemed to suddenly understand. Professor Heimer is still very friendly in front of his former friends. Neville muttered, thinking about it this way, we really can't get his friendly response. We are not people of the same era. You mean Snape? Harry thought for a moment and said, but he obviously had a fight with Snape. I don't know about that. Neville shook his head. They had indeed heard that Professor Highmore and Professor Snape were students of the same grade, and both were from Slytherin House, but they didn't know much more, and they even mentioned that the two of them suddenly got into a fight. Reason. Cedric had also heard of these things, but all his courage was spent on volunteering. He was already very satisfied with his role as an assistant and would never dare to offend Professor Highmer with any more words. After dinner on Wednesday, Cedric came to the ancient magic office again. He had already learned from Professor Kettleben how to take care of the sniff, but when he entered the office, he suddenly remembered he seemed to. I forgot to ask how to take care of a Shiu who can ride on a flying carpet. Oh, and there is also a Shiu who wears glasses. Would the average Niffler dress up like this? In the huge office, Toby was walking around, Al was sitting on his shoulders, and the two guys walked around and discussed things in low voices. Do you think it would be better to put the coffin here? Does it take up too much space? What about the opposite wall? Or behind the desk, so that people who come into the office can see it at a glance? Oh, it's Mr. Diggory, please come in. Cedric felt like he heard the word coffin, but after thinking about it carefully, he decided not to ask any more questions. He endured curiosity and sat across from the desk. Several pieces of parchment and articles automatically floated to his desk. In front of you, the categories are stacked. Ask me again if you don't understand anything. Toby gave the order casually, and then continued to wander around the office. Yes, Professor. Cedric cherished this opportunity. He hoped that his name would be mentioned when the magic circle had real influence. For this reason, he specifically requested Professor Highmore to add the name Hufflepuff to himself. Toby readily agreed, and at the same time crossed out the name of a certain embarrassed werewolf in his mind and decided not to write any special thanks for him. Different from Hermione's simple revision, Cedric's task is more clear, converting the spell into a usable magic circle. This task is not simple, but he can learn a lot. He can also take this opportunity to read many of Professor Hammer's articles that have not yet been published, which are different from the first draft given to Hermione and require more careful preparation before publication, are now read by Cedric in advance. Cedric began to read the articles he had prepared in advance. Whenever he read something he didn't understand, he would go to the bookshelf on the wall, where he could always find detailed reference materials without making a mistake. He didn't know whether these books were deliberately prepared by Professor Heimer, but there was no doubt that Professor Heimer appreciated those truly outstanding students, otherwise Cedric would not have gotten this opportunity. It's not easy to submit an article in a magazine, and it's even more difficult to sign a book that will be published soon. I just don't know why the publishing house is in faraway Africa, when the UK is obviously closer. When he feels that he has read almost everything, Cedric will draw the corresponding magic circle on the parchment. This step currently only requires an ordinary quill pen, otherwise you will have to use some special ink, which is all weird. Weird things, such as the tears of the silent bird, the tail feathers of the chimera, metals, gold, silver, and copper are also acceptable. Then there is blood, the blood of various magical animals, even the blood of wizards. However, this seemed to involve the category of black magic. Cedric did not dare to ask more, but he was always curious about one thing: how on earth can the magic ball be able to depict the magic circle at will? Although this can be done with ordinary parchment, the power is not the same at all. It can only be used for teaching purposes, and it cannot fully exert the power of the five-pointed star magic circle. After thinking blankly for a while, Cedric couldn't help but asked curiously, "Are you talking about the magic ball?" Toby did not show the magic ball. He carefully looked at the corner of the office and said without looking back, "Obviously, the magic ball is an extremely rare alchemical product, and the corresponding magic has been lost. I did think about imitating another. A magic ball, but it turns out it's not that simple. There are many unknown materials. They are not metals, or in other words, they are not metals that are dead, but have unique lives. Perhaps, this is also the reason why the wizards in the Lost City want to escape." Cedric nodded in confusion. Ancient magic has always been mysterious. In his eyes, Professor Heimer seemed to be more mysterious than ancient magic. For example, he doesn't know now whether what Professor Heimer said is a guess or a fact. Chapter 34. Finally Thursday arrived, which was also the day for flying lessons. The students came to the auditorium early for breakfast. An owl flew in front of Neville. Harry watched with envy as he opened the gift bag. It was a glass ball as big as a marble, which seemed to be filled with white smoke. "This is a memory ball," he explained. "As long as you forget what you did, the memory ball will turn red when you squeeze it tightly." As a result, the memory ball turned red in Neville's hands. Oh! Neville was thinking hard about what he had forgotten, but he happened to be seen by Draco Malfoy, who was passing by, and he snatched it away. Harry and Ron jumped up. They had already seen that Draco could not deal with him. But at this moment, there's still time to make trouble at the dinner table. "Have you finished your homework?" Professor Heimer suddenly appeared. The students remembered that he rarely came to the auditorium for breakfast, but they did not expect that he would appear in front of them today. The most terrifying part was that Professor Heimer's face clearly looked like his good mood had been disturbed. The smile on his face slowly faded and he stared at them with serious eyes. Draco suddenly froze in place. He saw the memory ball in his hand float back to Neville, and at the same time he heard, "Intentionally causing trouble, Slytherin will deduct 5 points." Then Toby stopped looking at Draco's red face, and his eyes slowly moved to Ron and Harry, who jumped up. "We are tired of sitting, Professor." Ron's mind was spinning very fast, and he quickly explained, "I want to stand up and stretch my legs, and we have already finished our homework." It's hard to say which sentence made Toby satisfied. In short, he didn't embarrass Ron and Harry anymore and continued to walk towards the teacher's table. It wasn't until Professor Heimer walked away that Harry couldn't help but laugh softly. "Tired from sitting? This is simply the funniest joke I've ever heard." Ron looked at Malfoy's bleak back. "To be honest, I think Professor Heimer is pretty good at this point. At least he won't favor Slytherin." "Neville, remember what you forgot." Toby originally wanted to sit further away, but since he approached the teacher's desk, Principal Dumbledore glanced at him from time to time. "Oh, what a pity," Toby said to Quirrell, who looked anxious. "It seems I can only sit over there." He walked over to Principal Dumbledore and sat down. "Aren't you going to attend some magic meeting today?" You actually have time to have breakfast at school. Dumbledore said calmly, because this allows me to look after my students better. He obviously wasn't referring to the students at the table below. That's really harsh. Toby said, it sounds like I'm a bad boy. Compared to James and Sirius, I'm far behind them. Dumbledore did not answer this sentence. He said, I received a notice saying that a whole carriage of luggage will be delivered to Hogwarts. Oh. Toby looked like he suddenly realized, I just thought of telling you this today. They are just some ordinary decorations. Don't professors all decorate their offices? I am no exception. By the way, who told you this? I'm just curious and won't do anything to that person. Is it Severus? I'll go talk to him after breakfast. It's not Severus. Dumbledore picked up a glass of pumpkin juice and said calmly, it's Mundungus Fletcher. He is also a member of the Order of the Phoenix. It's a good thing for you to get to know him in advance. Okay. Toby said helplessly. He recalled the cunning guy and how on earth Witch found him. How could he be so unreliable? He was still Dumbledore's subordinate. As for the reason why Mundungus had to be found, of course it was because those decorations could not be transported to Hogwarts in the ordinary way, or even come to the UK normally. Almost all of them are prohibited items, and even if they are not, they are within the scope of suspicion. Those are just some souvenirs. Toby had to say, they are just souvenirs found in ancient ruins. I got them all with great difficulty. I can't even sleep well without them. Dumbledore put down his cup and glanced at Toby. Toby immediately lamented, I didn't sleep well, okay. But those souvenirs are indeed extremely precious. Even the goblins don't know. I hid them all secretly and didn't even put them in Gringotts. I didn't even put them in Gringotts. I don't know if these things are valuable in their eyes, but I definitely won't sell them to them. As long as it doesn't harm the students, Dumbledore said, you and I both know how dangerous the research communicated in the letter is. Don't worry, Principal. Toby said confidently, how could it harm them? At best, it's just scary. Throughout the breakfast, Toby kept looking out the window eagerly. Unfortunately, the time when the carriage arrived at Hogwarts was inaccurate. After all, it contained a lot of suspected prohibited items. After breakfast, Toby returned to the office. He and Al continued to stare at the sky outside the window, just enough to catch a glimpse of the students taking flying lessons. As a result, he saw with his own eyes the scene when Neville fell off the broom, and he was unable to stop him in time. Neville's rise was too fast, faster than Frank and Alice combined. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Toby shook his head and sighed, they are really a family. Even their flying skills are equally bad. At this moment, Toby saw a black spot in the sky from a distance, and the black spot quickly grew in size. I'm coming. Toby left the office excitedly, and Al was also very excited. My lovely souvenirs are finally here. At the same time, when Ms. Hooch took Neville to the school hospital, Draco picked up the memory ball left by Neville. He first looked around cautiously, and then laughed loudly, look what this is, the memory ball given to him by that fool's grandma. Bring it here, Malfoy, Harry whispered. Everyone stopped talking and stared. Malfoy grinned ugly, and he kept provoking the boy who had humiliated him on the train. He flew to an oak tree, and Harry ignored Hermione's dissuasion and flew into the sky. It was the first time he felt the excitement of flying. Mysterious, it's like being born with it. Malfoy's expression became tense. They fought in the sky for a while. There was no Crabbe or Goyle to escort Malfoy, but he suppressed the anger in his heart and did not throw away the memory ball. After enduring Professor Heimer's reprimand, he refused to let go of this opportunity to fight Harry. If you want to come and get it, you can try it. Malfoy roared and rushed towards Harry. He seemed to be going crazy. Anger and shame flooded his brain, and he ignored them all for a moment. Harry couldn't escape this time, and the two of them collided hard in the air. Harry still insisted on the broom, but Malfoy couldn't hold the broom tightly because he had to hold the memory ball. He was knocked away and the broom was completely released. It was dozens of feet high here. Malfoy screamed in horror, and the people below were shouting. Harry made the most incredible move. He didn't even think he would do it. It was a completely subconscious reaction. He leaned forward, pointed the broomstick to the ground, accelerated and dived down, chasing Malfoy in. When Malfoy's head was only a foot away from the ground, Harry stretched out a hand and grabbed Malfoy's ankle, then straightened the broom handle in time and fell to the grass with Malfoy. Ah! Ah! Malfoy was still yelling with his eyes closed, and the students were stunned. Harry walked up to Malfoy in a muffled voice. "Bring it." He grabbed the memory ball that was still in Malfoy's hand. Malfoy slowly opened his eyes and found that he was safe. The next second, Professor McGonagall suddenly ran over angrily and scolded Harry loudly. Toby, who was watching this scene from a distance, put away his unused wand. He clicked his tongue and shook his head and said, "He looks so much like James. Severus must hate him to death." Chapter 35. There were a lot of sealed boxes floating behind Toby. He walked back to the castle and happened to run into the angry Dean McGonagall, with Harry following her pitifully. "Calm down, Dean McGonagall." Toby smiled and comforted, "They are just students who cause trouble. Hogwarts has the most indispensable students. At worst, they will deduct some points and put them in confinement for a while." When he heard this, Harry couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude to Professor Heimer. He thought he would be forcibly expelled from school at first, but it would undoubtedly be easier to accept if it was just a deduction of points and solitary confinement. Toby continued, "Of course, punishment also needs to be treated fairly. I saw Mr. Malfoy also rode a broomstick without permission. If you are embarrassed to deduct points from Slytherin House, just let me do it." "Oh, right." He suddenly wondered, why is it that only Potter is following you, and where is Malfoy? Didn't he make a mistake too? The expression on Professor McGonagall's face stiffened. "Are these all your luggage?" she asked suddenly. "That's right." Although he answered, Toby's eyes were still a little doubtful. He thought of something and Harry Potter happened to make a beautiful Wronski fake move, which was Quidditch. One of the tactics. "No way." Toby silently compared Harry and James, "He is only in the first year." Harry couldn't understand, but Professor McGonagall knew that Toby had seen through her plan. She said in an extremely low voice, "Gryffindor was defeated miserably by Slytherin in the last game. I have been thinking about it for several weeks. I dare not meet Snape. Severus is really going too far." Toby naturally blamed Snape for all this, but will the principal agree? This is an exception. I'll have a good talk with Albus. After receiving Dean McGonagall's answer, Toby couldn't help but want to tell Snape the good news in person. Severus will go crazy. The two parties separated on the stairs. Toby returned to his office and arranged it happily. Al loudly gave him advice. After everything was completed, Toby looked at the brand new office with satisfaction. In this way, those students who receive tutoring will definitely study harder. On the other side, Malfoy already knew the whole story, and also knew that it was Potter who suddenly saved him. But there was no gratitude at all in his heart, and his face looked terribly ugly. Harry's mood at this time was completely occupied by the joy of becoming a seeker. Ron held up a piece of steak and kidney pie, completely forgetting to bring it to his mouth. "Seeker," he said, "you saved Malfoy and then became Gryffindor's seeker? He would be furious if he knew. So we have to keep it a secret." Harry said, "You have to wait until the end to see the expression on Malfoy's face. That's the most interesting thing." Fred and George came to congratulate them. After they left, an unwelcome guy appeared with a very gloomy face. "Are you having your last meal, Potter? When will you return by train? Where are the Muggles?" The two sides bickered for a while, and then agreed to a duel at midnight. Malfoy thought of framing Harry. He originally thought that just telling Filch secretly about it would be enough, but now he didn't think so. It would be best to. In addition, Snape, the head of Slytherin, especially disliked Harry Potter. Once Harry is caught, he will definitely be severely punished by Snape. Hermione overheard the conversation between the two parties, and she tried to persuade them because they were embarrassed, but the two of them just thought she was being nosy. This made Hermione feel very bad. On her way to the ancient magic office after dinner, she secretly decided to stop them. She attaches great importance to college points and works hard to answer questions in every class, but she doesn't want to be deducted a large amount of points in vain. Fortunately, she was notified in advance that a new first draft was out, which might make her feel better. But when she appeared in front of the ancient magic office, she found that Cedric was blocking the door and did not go in, nor did she find Hermione later. However, Hermione could still see that the side of Cedric's face was a little pale. The two of them are not from the same college. She has never spoken to Cedric, and she initially regarded him as a target of threats, fearing that the editor's job would be taken away. It was not a job at all. It can even be seen as reading the Daily Prophet occasionally, but you just need to pick out typos by the way, which is very easy. Hermione didn't talk to Cedric this time. She looked into the office through the gap and was suddenly frightened. Opposite them, and behind the desk, stood a thick pharaoh's coffin. It was originally placed horizontally, but it was deliberately placed vertically so that the golden figure on the top of the coffin faced the direction of the door. The faces are lifelike, especially the eyes, which are staring straight at them. That would be fine, but there were still two human-shaped skeletons standing on both sides of the coffin, their heads also rushing towards the door, and their empty eye sockets seemed to be staring at them. In other places, they also saw a huge potted plant. They didn't know what kind of tree it was, but it looked like a human being howling in pain. Next to him was a piece of armor stained with blood, holding a long axe in his hand, maintaining the posture of chopping at a potted plant. A huge piece of ice was placed in the corner, slowly exuding cold air. It seemed that something was frozen inside, but there was no trace of the ice melting. Hermione no longer dared to look at anything more, because the atmosphere in the entire office seemed extremely strange and gloomy, completely different from usual, and the lights had become dim. Today's office always reminds Hermione of a cemetery under the moonlight. She finally understands the reason why Cedric blocked the door, and she wouldn't dare to go in. At this moment, the pharaoh's coffin facing them slowly opened. "Oh oh oh!" cried Cedric, pointing to the coffin, and his screams became operatic. Hermione was ready to turn around and run away, but suddenly she heard a familiar voice. "I really miss you, Al," as if the time hidden in the coffin was still yesterday. "Ah! You're right. Fortunately, we ran fast enough later, otherwise the principal would have to send me letters in the pyramid in the future. Hey, why don't you come in?" Toby smiled and waved to the two of them. He seemed to be in a good mood. It would be great if the school had some kind of Halloween decoration competition. I'm definitely number one. Chapter 36. Neither Cedric nor Hermione dared to answer the phone, nor did they dare to enter the office. Professor Heimer." Cedric hesitated. "Hufflepuff has Quidditch training tomorrow, so I need to get up early, or I'll go back today." Toby was busy taking back the magic ball, and the atmosphere in the office suddenly returned to its original state. The lights were brightly lit. "The illusion of Moonlight Cemetery should be considered as a backup," Toby and Al murmured. "It's too dark to see anything clearly, and it's not convenient for students to study." "Mr. Diggory, what are you talking about?" "Oh," I said. Cedric looked towards the more accepting office. "Hufflepuff has Quidditch training tomorrow, but it's okay if I go back later. I can fall asleep easily." "It doesn't matter," Toby comforted, "whether it's you or Miss Granger, if you have other things to do, don't come. Of course, the premise is that you must complete your homework on time and don't become a tutor." Cedric didn't know if this was Professor Highmore's sincere words. He had seen the consequences of Marcus Flint's secret complaint. Before that, Professor Highmore had also told him to just ask Professor Snape to find him. Once again, Cedric was confused. He and Hermione were sitting across the desk from each other as usual. Cedric tried hard not to pay attention to the brand new office, but Hermione couldn't help but look at the blood-stained armor. She had seen many similar armors in the castle corridors, but fortunately the colors were not the same. Different, the one in the office was pitch black, otherwise she couldn't help but suspect that Professor Heimer had moved it to the office without permission. "What's the problem, Miss Granger?" Toby noticed something strange about Hermione. Hermione asked cautiously, "Professor, is there anyone in this black armor? The posture of the armor looks so vivid, as if it is really going to chop down the strange-shaped potted plant." "It turns out there is." Toby's answer shocked the two of them, "but it's gone now. It's really amazing to say that I got this armor from an old castle. It was said that it was haunted. I originally thought it was just a rumor, but I didn't expect it to be really haunted. That archaeological trip took a lot of energy out of me." Cedric could no longer remain calm. He quietly glanced at the pharaoh's coffin that seemed to be standing in front of him. "Excuse me, Professor, is there anyone in this coffin?" "It was originally there too." Toby smacked his lips and said, "And the monster inside the coffin is a bit scary. In order to save our lives, Al and I even got into the coffin and hid for several days. I don't know if that guy is dead now." "Anyway," Toby said to them before the two of them could continue asking questions, "you don't need to worry about these souvenirs, they are all safe. I need to leave for a while, and I may not come back when. You can leave at any time. No need to wait to say hello to me." After saying these words, Toby took Al and left immediately, without even giving the two of them time to react. The two people who had never met each other looked at each other for the first time, and they both saw shock in each other's eyes. Before this, they didn't pay much attention to Professor Heimer's identity as an archaeologist, but it wasn't until today that they finally had a real sense of it. Moreover, it seems that it is not just ordinary archaeology. How can an ordinary archaeologist break into a truly haunted castle and bring out a suit of armor? They lowered their heads again, pretending that the weird things around them didn't exist. After reading the information for a period of time, Cedric walked to the bookshelf as usual and wanted to look for information. He pointed back and forth at the book, then suddenly turned back and stared closely at the skeletons on both sides of the coffin. "Gee, Miss Granger!" Cedric called out Hermione's name for the first time. "Do you think these two skeletons are looking at us?" Hermione was frightened and trembled. She immediately raised her head and found that the skeleton in front of her was still the same. However, the skeleton sitting opposite Cedric had changed its direction at some point, and its empty eyes were staring at the stuffed book next to the bookshelf. "Derek! I gotta go!" Hermione screamed. Wait, I'll come back when the professor is here." She hurriedly ran out of the office, and Cedric hurriedly followed her. "I have to leave too. Think carefully, it's more important to deal with Quidditch training." After both of them left, the door slowly closed. The skeleton that was originally staring at Cedric slowly moved and aimed its head at the door again, as if nothing had happened. Hermione ran back to the dormitory with a panicked expression. Her roommates just glanced at her and looked away, and no one cared enough to ask her what was wrong. Hermione had long been accustomed to this, and she quickly calmed down on her own without relying on anyone's help. She even understood why her roommates didn't like her, and she also knew that they would say bad things behind their backs. It was just a show of love. Or maybe it's arrogant. But it was impossible for Hermione to change this attitude. As a student who had never been exposed to the magical world, she couldn't help but want to work harder to avoid being underestimated by others. If Cedric worked hard for Hufflepuff, then Hermione focused more on herself. All in order not to be underestimated by others. It can also be said to be inferiority complex. The moment she escaped from the office, Hermione thought she would never want to go back there again. But thinking about it carefully, it seems that she has nowhere else to go. Hermione changed into her pink pajamas without saying a word, and she read a book on the bed for a while. But after a while, she got up and got out of bed, took the book with her and left the dormitory. Throughout the entire process, no roommate asked her what she was going to do. Hermione came to the empty common room. She nestled in the armchair and stared directly at the flames in the fireplace, looking a little helpless and pitiful. This is very different from the usual Hermione, and it is only when she is alone that she shows such a different demeanor. To be honest, until now, she didn't think the magical world was that good. She was a little homesick. The fire in the fireplace slowly turned into a weak fire, and Hermione was stunned for a long time. Suddenly she heard something, turned over and looked over, and subconsciously said words of accusation. She originally thought that the people who appeared would be Harry and Ron who were going to duel, but she didn't expect to see Al slowly flying out of the passage. He was sitting on the flying carpet, looked around, and finally found. Hermione was stunned and waved happily. Ah! Chapter 37. Mr. Al. Hermione was surprised. Why are you here? No. How did you get in? Even if Al knew the password, he couldn't say it himself. After all, he was just a niffler. Al flew in front of Hermione. He suddenly took out a skull from his belly pocket and put it on his head. His small eyes looked at little Hermione through the empty sockets. Hermione was frightened. What was even more frightening was that the skull opened and closed its mouth and actually started talking. Is it Miss Granger? Hermione thought it was Al speaking at first, but after being stunned for several seconds, she finally realized that it was Professor Heimer's voice. It's just that the other party's voice is extremely low, so low that it's hard to hear clearly. It seems that he is in a situation that is not suitable for speaking loudly. Professor Heimer? Hermione asked tentatively. She didn't know where to look for a moment. The eyes of Al and the skull overlapped, but Hermione really didn't want to look at the skull, so she had to lower her gaze and stare at Al's belly pocket. Al immediately covered his pocket, stared at Hermione warily, and pointed at the skull's head. Hermione had no choice but to move her gaze back, and at the same time she saw the skull's mouth opening and closing again, revealing Professor Heimer's voice. It's me. It seems that Al has found you. Fortunately, you are not like Mr. Diggory. When he fell asleep, I originally wanted to put the skull head next to his pillow, but after thinking about it carefully, I decided not to. After all, you have experienced a fright. To make a long story short, after I returned to the office, I already knew what happened. Those two skeletons were just one of my collections. Although they looked a bit scary, they were actually very shy and just wanted to say hello to you. And they were punished. As you can see, I removed their heads, and one of them is in Al's hand. It's on its head. Hermione muttered something in her heart, and at the same time she felt a little warm and grateful for no reason. She didn't expect Professor Hammer to be comforting. Then will you forgive me, Miss Granger? It's nothing, Professor. After all, I wasn't hurt at all. That's great. I don't know if it was an illusion, but Hermione felt that the skull in front of her laughed happily. Then you won't tell Principal Dumbledore about this, right? Hey! Hermione was stunned. Here's the thing. The skull explained patiently, well, this is a surprise for Principal Dumbledore, but we can't let him know in advance, otherwise there will be no surprise, right? That seems right, Professor. Can I ask a question? Just ask. When do you plan to present this surprise to the principal? It's not certain yet, but the sooner the better. Is there a specific time? This is your second question. I'm sorry I can't answer it. Hermione's expression gradually became strange. Was Professor Hammer worried that he would complain? He can actually be afraid of people. This is very dangerous, Professor. Archaeology is inherently dangerous. I coexist with danger. The danger is myself. Otherwise, it would not be me controlling the ancient magic, but the ancient magic controlling me. What? Hermione felt as if she had heard something extraordinary. It's nothing, just pretend that you heard it wrong. Well, in that case, then this matter is settled. What's settled? We can't reveal it to Principal Dumbledore in advance. Isn't this what we were talking about at the beginning? At this time, a strange voice suddenly came from the skull. I seem to hear Principal Dumbledore's name. Toby, can you explain what you are doing? The look is really funny, whispering to the skull in the corridor in the middle of the night. It's Snape's voice. Hermione's eyes widened. Seeing that the situation was not good, Al quickly put away the skull head, flew back to the passage on the flying carpet, and left the common room. At the same time, in the corridor on the fourth floor, Toby covered his heart with one hand and held another skull head with the other hand, looking half frightened. Are you a ghost? You can't even make a sound when you walk. Snape stared at him with an evil look. Don't try to change the subject in front of me, just tell me. Why are you wandering in the corridor in the middle of the night, and why do you mention Principal Dumbledore? Oh! He suddenly said in a clear tone, I understand, you are in trouble again because you are worried that you will be called by the principal to talk. Toby put away the skull head and threatened unabashedly, so what? Do you want to be called to talk to two people? Do you want the principal to find out that two professors were dueling in the school corridor in the middle of the night? Don't argue with me, come with me, I'll take you to see the principal. Let go, Severus, I'm warning you, let go. Also, please keep your voice down. Don't wake up the portrait. Portrait. Snape slowly turned his head, and the schadenfreude in his eyes deepened. So you were planning a portrait? Don't tell me that it has something to do with archaeology. Toby said nothing. He tried hard to break away from Snape's hand. Snape narrowed his eyes and looked Toby up and down. Are you serious? Toby snorted coldly, and he walked over to a portrait. This was a portrait of Alberic Groening. He was the inventor of the dung bomb and one of the members of the Chocolate Frog card. He was now lying on his back in the portrait. Sleep on the deep bed. Toby gently opened the frame and looked at the back of the portrait and the wall behind the portrait. Alberic Groening's body turned twice involuntarily, but Toby's movements were particularly familiar, and he was obviously not the first. The first time I did this kind of work, I didn't let the other party really wake up. After the inspection, Toby mocked disdainfully, ignorant guy, do you know how many institutions are hidden behind the portrait? I have experienced countless, not to mention the countless in Hogwarts. There may be secrets hidden behind any of Ching's portraits. But you also said, this is Hogwarts. Snape grabbed Toby's arm again, this is not your place for archaeology. I have to take you to see the principal today and let him take a good look at what you have done. I want to see that you are still in school. Stay how long? Toby said aha, he raised a finger, almost touching Snape's forehead, I know you haven't completely given up on driving me away. If you don't let go, I will really let you meet the principal in person, the deceased principal. How about Phineas Black? He and you are a perfect match, you can form a who is more annoying combination. Just when the two people almost started fighting, they didn't dare to use the wand, Filch appeared out of nowhere. He looked at this scene in shock, but he still took the time to say, Mr. Snape, I heard the students sneaking out. Chapter 38. I'm not lying to you. Professor Highmore and Professor Snape are in the corridor. This is obviously Malfoy's trap. He will not go to the trophy room. Stop joking, do you think we will believe it? They fought last time. If they were really together, would the corridor be so quiet? Hermione finally met Harry and Ron, who were going to duel. She lowered her voice and yelled at them, but the two men couldn't listen at all. As a result, when all three of them walked out of the common room, they found that the fat lady had gone somewhere, and Hermione couldn't go back. What should we do? She asked in a loud voice. In the end, she had to follow Harry and Ron, so that even if she was discovered, she could have these two people testify for her. Not long after walking, they came across Neville sleeping on the floor. His arm had healed, but he had forgotten the password, so he fell asleep on the floor. The first two people turned into four people. Ron was very angry, and Harry quickly stopped him from continuing to get angry. As they walked along the corridor, moonlight poured in from the high windows, streaks across the ground. Every time they turned, Harry thought he would bump into Filch or Mrs. Norris, but luckily, they were lucky. Yes. They hurriedly climbed the stairs to the fourth floor and tiptoed towards the prize display room. But their luck finally ended here. Even without Ron's reminder, Harry could still hear two sets of rapid footsteps. The most terrifying part was that they also heard Snape's voice. Run! Harry said in a low voice. On the other side, after Filch said that, Snape no longer cared about Toby. He and Filch ran away in a hurry. Toby was not curious at all, and he continued to seize the time to check other walls on the fourth floor. He opened each portrait gently, and then looked back carefully. This kind of thing couldn't be done during the day, it would be too conspicuous, and could only be done at night when the portraits were asleep. After a while, Toby suddenly heard the sound of armor falling. The sound was clear and spread throughout the entire corridor. Well, it's so noisy, what are you doing? The portrait was woken up. Toby's movements suddenly froze, but in the next second, he naturally turned out a rag and wiped it on the frame. Your portrait is dirty, these house elves are really unreliable in their work. He criticized the house elf for a while, and the portrait finally fell asleep again. Immediately afterwards, Toby, who was ashen-faced, met four people who were running away in the corridor. They had just entered the forbidden room and found the three-headed dog Lowe. Now they were busy running for their lives, but they didn't run far. Then I met Professor Highmore, who was blocking the middle of the corridor like a god of death. Ah! Ron screamed and fell directly on his back, tripping over Harry, Neville, and Hermione, who were behind him one after another, and his body was pressed at the bottom. Under the dual blessing of panic and breathlessness, Ron almost died. Passed out all of a sudden. This time, you were also tired from sleeping, so you went out for a run in the middle of the night. No one dared to speak out. Even Neville and even Hermione, who had just contacted him, were frightened by Professor Highmore's tone. You four, follow me. The four people got up quickly, and Ron held his chest in pain. He regretted it so much now. He didn't expect that what Hermione said was true. Snape and Professor Highmore were both in the corridor of the castle. Harry regretted it even more than Ron. He had long felt that something was wrong, but he was inexplicably unwilling to listen to Hermione's words, purely out of anger. Neville's tears were streaming down his face, while Hermione had a look of despair on her face. She didn't even know how she got to the ancient magic office. Toby did not turn on all the lights, leaving only a dull layer of light, making both the coffin and the headless skeleton look even more weird and terrifying. The four people stood across the desk in fear. They only felt that there were countless pairs of eyes staring at them secretly. In terms of the degree of terror, Professor Highmore's office was more terrifying than Lu Wei's room. Maybe there were only unknown forbidden things. Only Lin can compare. Toby sat on the sofa behind his desk with a gloomy face. He hadn't completed even 1/10 of his plan tonight, and he didn't know when he would have a chance to look at those portraits again. "Tell me about it," Toby said coldly, acting as if he didn't know Hermione and Neville at all, and was even harsher than he was in class. "You only have one chance to explain." Harry and Ron were both frightened, and Neville was still crying. He even thought of the crystal ball that healed his parents. What if Professor Hemmer took the crystal ball away because of him? Neville couldn't help but burst into tears, but Toby was too indifferent and didn't say a word of comfort. His gloomy eyes were even scarier than Snape, which brought them endless pressure. But at this moment, it seemed like a miracle happened. "Professor, it's me," Hermione stammered, tears streaming down from the corners of her eyes. She actually cried too, and she cried even more sadly than Neville. "I can't stand it anymore. I have no friends and no one likes me," she cried and said, releasing all her grievances in an instant, "so I thought about going out to relax, even to the library." Well, the three of them decided to accompany me. Hermione really couldn't stand it anymore. She didn't have any friends in school, so it was difficult for her to continue to persevere. As a result, she was caught sneaking out in the middle of the night by Professor Heimer himself. It wouldn't matter if it were other professors, but it was Professor Heimer who had great hopes for her. She could tell how disappointed he was with her as soon as she saw the expression on the professor's face, which shattered Hermione's last thoughts. The string of reason and persistence were completely broken. She couldn't stay at Hogwarts any longer. Even if she wanted to, she probably wouldn't be able to stay. The school's punishment for students who make serious mistakes would definitely be extremely severe, and they would definitely be expelled. As for testifying, those were just Hermione's angry words. Otherwise, she would have reported Harry and Ron in advance, and she would not have waited alone in the common room until midnight. Ron and Harry were both stunned. They watched Hermione lie to the professor. In an instant, both of them felt extremely guilty and regretful at the same time. "No. That's not the case, Professor," Harry mustered up the courage to say. "Shut up, Mr. Potter," Toby interrupted with a sullen face, "the one opportunity to explain has passed. Each of you will bear the price of 30 points, as well as confinement. The specific subsequent punishment will depend on your performance in confinement. If you dissatisfy me, you will regret dissatisfying me." Then the four people were kicked out of the office. After they all left, Toby's expression slowly changed and he sighed deeply. "It's so stupid. Everyone is so stupid." There was undisguised disappointment in his tone. After a while, the office door opened again, and in came Snape, who had learned nothing. He glanced at Toby, who was sighing, and inexplicably put away his thoughts of accountability. Instead, he carefully looked at the collection in the office, and finally stood in front of the piece of ice that would never melt. "What's in here?" he asked. Toby said quietly, "Maybe it's a wizard from ancient Greece, or maybe it's a Dementor. Maybe it's a separated memory. You can only see it with your own eyes when the ice melts. Want a drink?" Snape didn't answer, but he had already sat on the chair opposite Toby. A bottle of gin flew up from the drawer and was slowly poured into 2 wine glasses. The two of them rarely had any more bickering, quarreling or blaming each other. Toby picked up the wine glass and shook it gently in his hand. "Tell me, why are they so stupid? Why were we so stupid in the first place? Even Lily, such a kind-hearted Lily, was angry with us. James had been annoying her for so long, but he really got her. To be honest, I originally thought you were the most promising one. I occasionally thought about being the godfather of your future children. What a pity, Severus. What a pity." Snape couldn't help but clutch the wine glass tightly, and he didn't know if he heard Toby's last words. Unfortunately, magic cannot bring people back to life. Chapter 39. 4 people, a total of 120 points, which is enough to make Gryffindor's hourglass drop a lot. You know, it is not a long time before the start of school, but in such a short period of time, Gryffindor's hourglass has dropped a lot. Landfinder almost ruined all hopes of winning the Academy Cup. The news slowly spread. Harry Potter, the famous Harry Potter, he was the one who caused Gryffindor to lose so many points, and he and 3 other stupid first-year students. Harry was originally the most famous person in the school, but everyone finally realized that he was no big deal, and even worse, and he became a target of public criticism. He would be pointed out no matter where he went. Dean McGonagall also knew about this. She was furious in the Transfiguration class, not at Toby, but at Harry and several others. According to her words, if it were her, she would at least 50 points will be deducted, 50 points for each person. It seemed that in the blink of an eye, no one liked Harry anymore, and no one stared at his forehead curiously. Harry would lower his head wherever he went. Ron did not comfort him, and he himself also let. He was one of the main culprits for losing points in the college, and what happened to Hermione made his mood extremely complicated. Harry and Ron came to the auditorium. Malfoy taunted loudly as he passed by them, "Isn't this the famous Harry Potter? He actually has the nerve to continue to stay in school." His plan succeeded, but he hit the muzzle of the gun. "How could there be such a shameless guy like you?" Harry shouted angrily, "I saved you during the flying lesson. How could there be such a shameless person like you? You are so bad. You will not end well." Ron also scolded, "You are the most shameless person. You have no shame at all. You dare to fool your savior, and you have become a coward who ran away without a fight." Malfoy's face turned blue and white. He had already known what happened during the flying lesson, but that was what Malfoy could not tolerate the most, being saved by Harry Potter. "Just wait for me." Malfoy dropped his last harsh words, and even the sarcastic mood disappeared. The mood of the two of them did not improve after scolding Malfoy. Even when they saw the envelope on the slender package, they couldn't laugh. Even if they did, it was just a forced smile. "Don't open the package on the table. It contains your new broomstick Nimbus 2000. I don't want everyone to know that you have a new broomstick, lest they all want it. Oliver Wood will be waiting for you at the Quidditch pitch at 7 o'clock tonight. Give you your first training class. Professor M. McGonagall. Nimbus 2000. Ron and Harry looked at each other. They both thought Harry would be disqualified from joining the Quidditch team. "I'm going to take the broom back," Harry said. "I'm not going to join the Quidditch team." When Team Captain Wood heard these words, he was shocked. "This is your chance to turn around. Don't do this, and don't think about the points deduction. How can you refuse?" He comforted Harry for a while, but Harry could see that the smile on his face was forced. "But I still can't attend the training class tonight," Harry said frustratedly. "We are going to Professor Hemmer's place for solitary confinement. I wish you good luck." Wood said, his words seemed much more sincere. Everyone knew that Professor Highmore was the most difficult professor to mess with, and he was completely different from the other new Professor Quirrell. They unpacked the broom in the dormitory. Even though he didn't know anything about the type of broomstick, Harry could see what a great broom it was. It had beautiful lines and luster, and the handle was made of mahogany. The long tail is made of neat, straight branches, and the words Nimbus 2000 are printed brightly on the top of the broom handle. Ron just exclaimed and remained silent. He looked at Harry hesitantly, and Harry happened to be looking at him too. The two of them still have the most important thing left to do. "When are you going to apologize to Hermione?" "Waiting for you to make a decision." On the way back to the dormitory that night after they were caught, they apologized to Neville separately. In order to prevent him from crying too hard and not hearing clearly, the two of them even apologized again early the next morning. Anyway, said that although Neville took the initiative to follow them, he was still involved by the two of them. Neither of them cared about this trivial matter. When they saw Neville crying so hard, they couldn't help but some guilt. The most important thing is Hermione. She no longer talks to Harry and Ron. She has completely changed since that night. She is even more lonely than before. And now she is trying her best to answer questions in class, as if she is planning to. All points deducted will be regained. This left Harry and Ron never finding a good opportunity to apologize. "I don't understand why she wants to speak for us," Ron said. "She doesn't have to do this." "I seem to understand," Harry said. "I thought at first that I would be expelled directly." Hermione must have thought the same. She felt that she could no longer stay in Hogwarts, so she just do us a favor. And do you still remember? Before that night, Hermione waited until midnight alone. If she really didn't want us to lose points, she could have asked the professors to report us in advance. Maybe she is not as bad as we thought. It's not that bad. Ron sighed. You are better than Percy at ruining other people's moods. Fortunately, I had eaten dinner, otherwise I wouldn't even have the strength to be detained. Nimbus 2000 had long been forgotten by them, and Ron was not in the mood to discuss Quidditch at this time. After discussing it for a while, he and Harry walked to the common room, but unfortunately Hermione was not there. "Maybe in the library," Harry said, or maybe I went to Professor Hammer's office in advance. After Neville also came back, the three of them set off. Their hearts were heavy, not knowing what would be waiting for them soon. Are you okay, Neville? Ron asked concerned. Neville's eyes were swollen from crying, and he stammered, no. It's not good. He never dared to go to Professor Heimer alone. He was worried about his parents more than anything else, and he was still afraid that Professor Hamo would take away the crystal ball. They walked to the door of the ancient magic office. Harry took a deep breath and knocked lightly on the door a few times. The door opened, but the person who opened the door was not Professor Heimer, but someone whom Harry could never have imagined. Snape. Chapter 40. Snape looked at the three of them with disdain, and the corners of his mouth curved into a weird arc, a bit like he was mocking. Come in. He said, turned, and walked into the office. Harry and Ron looked at each other silently. They didn't expect Snape to be here, but both of them had no choice but to go inside. Neville followed them fearfully, and Snape was also one of the professors he feared most. When they entered the office, they discovered that it had changed. There was a large space in the middle, which was half the size of a classroom. Hermione did arrive very early. She did not sit down, but stood in front of the desk, her head bowed deeply. Toby was sitting behind his desk, staring expressionlessly at the three people who came in later. Everyone is here. He stood up and said, since you like dueling so much, tonight's confinement will be conducted in the form of a duel. In addition, you are all from Gryffindor House. Maybe you don't know yet, Godric Gryffindor. Duojang is a skilled duel master, and he is not only good at using wands, but also has superb swordsmanship. When the enemy he faces is a Muggle, Gryffindor will give up using wands and only use Muggle skills. Way to duel. You also have the same two choices tonight, either use the wand or use the sword. At this time, Al suddenly appeared. It dragged 4 small wooden swords with great effort and threw them in front of the 4 people. When they heard the word duel, Harry and Ron understood that Professor Hammer knew everything. But they never imagined that this would become a way of confinement. You will be divided into 2 teams. Toby continued calmly, Miss Granger and Mr. Longbottom team up, and Mr. Potter and Mr. Weasley team up. The losing party will be expelled from school and leave Hogwarts. Only the person who wins the duel can stay. You have 1 minute to choose your weapon, a wand or a wooden sword. Let's get started. After saying these words, Toby had no intention of explaining any more. He sat back behind the desk again, and Al jumped on his shoulders. Snape also walked over and sat down next to him, with a malicious smile on his face. Neville, Ron, and Harry were all frightened. It turned out that they were not out of the crisis and might still be expelled from school. But the decision to expel the candidates was dual, and they were still required to attack each other and drive each other away with their own hands. How could this be possible? It's so cruel. While the 3 of them were stunned, Hermione had already picked up the wooden sword silently, and she stared at Harry and Ron with hatred. You're crazy. Ron said in shock, are you really going to kick me and Harry out of school? At the very least, I have to teach you a lesson with my own hands. Hermione gritted her teeth and said, if it weren't for your disobedience at the beginning, so many things would have happened later. I told you this was a trap, but you still have to. If you want to rush in, the college will be deducted 120 points. That's 120 points. The points I got for answering the questions so far are less than 30 points, which is not enough for me to be deducted. Score. Harry and Ron finally understood how deep the resentment in Hermione's heart was. It could be seen from her eyes that she had never forgiven them. Moreover, after suffering even more profound indifference from her classmates, Hermione seemed to have changed her mind. I don't want to think so calmly anymore, and I don't want to stand up anymore. Now she just wants to give Harry and Ron a hard lesson, and teach them with her own hands. Toby's expression remained calm as he watched this scene, while Snape had a hateful and carefree expression. Harry felt angry when he saw it. He felt like a clown on the stage, deliberately being raped. Arranged to be teased in front of Snape. But he still didn't take out his wand or pick up the wooden sword, but apologized sincerely to Hermione. Sorry Hermione, Ron and I have always wanted to apologize to you, but we never found the chance. At this moment, Toby interrupted mercilessly, the waiting time is over and the duel begins. Hermione yelled and rushed towards Harry and Ron. The two were shocked Hermione actually meant it. They fled to the rear in a panic, and Harry hid behind a wooden door that was almost completely rotten. This was also one of Toby's collections, and he didn't know why it was placed here. Don't be impulsive, Hermione. 1 minute was not enough time for Harry to make such a difficult decision. He was still trying to dissuade him. I'm sorry, Ron and I both know we were wrong. We have been looking for you all day, but you don't care at all. Talk to us. Won't talk to you. Hermione angrily struck the wooden door with her wooden sword, making Harry fall back in fright. Now you know how to be obedient. What were you doing earlier? Pick up your wooden sword and have a good fight with me. Don't be ridiculous, Hermione, how could I possibly? Do not talk nonsense. Hermione hit Harry really hard on the back, causing him to scream in pain. Then Hermione hit Harry hard several more times, causing Harry to roll back and forth on the ground. How could there be someone as stupid as you? This sentence was whispered by Hermione. Harry was so shocked that he immediately turned around, but was hit hard again and screamed. Hermione continued to whisper through Harry's screams, "Do you want to be expelled? If you don't want to be expelled, pick up the wooden sword quickly." On the other side, Neville also raised his wooden sword tremblingly. Ron looked at him dumbfounded. You want to do it too? This is Neville who has a poor memory and is timid. Neville's lips trembled. He had already imagined the consequences of being expelled. Not only was he expelled, but even the crystal ball used to treat his parents would definitely be taken away by Professor Heimer. He screamed indiscriminately to embolden himself, but the result was that he split his head, but it also hurt Ron's toes. Ron immediately covered his shoes and screamed in pain. He quickly picked up another wooden sword and blocked another attack from Neville. Then he finally stood up again, but he did not take the initiative and could only wait for Neville to make a move. He would block it when the time came. It was easy, he could tell at a glance what moves the slow-moving Neville was going to use. Stop messing around, Neville, why are you crazy? Stop. It hurts. It hurts. Harry finally picked up the wooden sword, and the four of them started fighting little by little. Ron and Neville seemed to be training, and the wooden swords would always stand together in the air. Hermione, on the other hand, really wanted to teach Harry a lesson, and since Harry didn't dare to do anything, he would often scream again. Click! Click! Suddenly, 2 consecutive sounds rang out, and the wooden swords in Harry's and Neville's hands broke at the same time. The atmosphere suddenly became subtle. Chapter 41. Ron looked at Neville, who had only the hilt of the sword left in his hand. He was stunned for a few seconds, but then Hermione immediately rushed towards him. And you? Hermione yelled while beating her, I have never seen someone as stubborn as you, who has no brains at all, and can be deceived by others. Are you so proud of living in the magical world since you were a child? Ron didn't dare to take the initiative to hit Neville, and naturally he didn't dare to attack Hermione, but Hermione's attack speed was much faster than Neville. There were always times when Ron couldn't resist, and he screamed in pain. Ah! Oh! Hiss! It hurts! Don't! Ah! Harry and Neville didn't know what to do, so they could only stand aside and watch Ron being beaten up by Hermione. After the two fought for a while, there was another click, and the wooden sword in Ron's hand broke. He watched helplessly as Hermione hit his arm at a very fast speed. Click! Now, the last wooden sword is gone. Hermione gasped and stared at Ron. Ron covered his arms tightly and did not dare to speak. He suddenly thought that the duel seemed to be over, so would they also be expelled? At this moment, Toby stood up again, strode up to Ron, and opened the sleeve of the arm that was last hit. Ron thought his arm was swollen at first, but now he realized that nothing happened. Harry was not bruised and bruised. Only the pain seemed to be real. A broken wooden sword flew in front of Toby, and he held it in the air and showed it. Did you see the scratches on it? This is a special magic circle that only conveys pain, but not the real injury. He glanced at each person's face. Do you know what this means? No one dared to speak. Hermione looked at Toby carefully, her eyes looking a little guilty. Neville was still panting and looked like he had no strength at all. Ron and Harry could only gently rub the sore spots on their bodies. It means this will be extra homework for you. Toby said sternly, learn this magic circle before the next class. Those who can't do it will continue to be detained. After leaving the office, Harry, Ron, and Neville were still in a daze. So, we don't have to be expelled. Ron was surprised. Hermione, who was walking at the front, snorted and didn't bother to talk to him. Under constant questioning from Harry and Ron, Hermione raised her chin and explained, "The loser will be expelled. In this case, only if there is a tie, no one will be punished. But this is a duel, with a wand. It would be difficult to draw a draw with a wooden sword, but it can be done with a wooden sword, as long as all the wooden swords are broken. That's why Hermione hit her hard and fast in the last blow," Harry explained, "otherwise, it would be too late to break the last wooden sword." "Oh." Ron nodded stupidly, "I thought you really wanted to beat me to death." Hermione snorted again. She hadn't completely forgiven the two of them, otherwise she wouldn't have hit them so many times just now. At this time, Harry and Ron no longer felt any pain. This was obviously the function of the magic circle, which would not allow the pain to last too long. "Thank you, Hermione." Harry said sincerely that she had just resolved a crisis for several people without causing anyone to be expelled. "Humph." Hermione ignored him. "I'm sorry, Hermione." Ron also apologized, "If it doesn't work, just hit me a few more times. It'll be fine in a while anyway." They also took away the broken wooden sword so that they could better learn this magic circle. Toby's attitude in handing over the homework was serious. "Humph." The grudge in Hermione's heart has not been completely resolved. At this moment, Neville suddenly burst into tears, startling the three of them. "Why are you crying again?" Hermione asked confused, and Harry and Ron quickly comforted him. I'm so happy!" Neville cried. He finally kept the crystal ball that healed his parents. Although Toby never mentioned it, Neville thought so. Strangely enough, they walked back to the common room together. While comforting Neville, Hermione finally stopped being so cold. Ron and Harry quickly seized the opportunity to apologize, and it wasn't until the end that Hermione snorted again and left. But this sound was obviously not that angry. "Well done, Neville," Ron said sleepily, "your crying really helped a lot." Neville rubbed his eyes in confusion. He didn't feel that he was helping, and he was crying sincerely. He had no idea what role he had played. Ron turned his head to Harry. "Did you hear the trapdoor?" Hermione said. Hermione was the only one who saw that there was a trapdoor in the Forbidden Room on the 4th floor, and she didn't tell them about it until just now. Harry had been thinking about this. It was obvious that the three-headed dog was guarding something, and the small package in the underground vault of number 713 was probably hidden behind the trapdoor. "There's another thing," Harry reminded. "Didn't you hear what Hermione said? Professor Heimer might have noticed her little tricks, but he didn't punish us. Why do you think this was possible?" "Maybe it's just because he didn't see it," Ron said. "The scene was so chaotic, how could everything be seen? Anyway, Hermione's last hit hurt me a lot. This magic circle is really magical. It will only cause pain, but no injury." His eyes suddenly widened in horror. "Isn't this a magic circle specially used for corporal punishment of students? This is education." In the ancient magic office, Toby finally smiled, but Snape looked gloomy. "Speaking of which, I learned this from Principal Dumbledore." Toby seemed not to have seen the expression on Snape's face. He continued, "The work of education is not limited to the classroom, but also outside the classroom. There are also a lot of things that require a lot of thought." "You mean you were specifically called to give a lecture?" Snape said coldly. "Then you have indeed received an extraordinary education." "Hey, Severus, what's the use of getting angry at me?" Toby smiled. "Don't blame the mistakes of their 4 children on me. It's not my fault that Harry Potter was not expelled from school. I just gave them a chance to tie, but they caught me. Thinking about it this way, these children are not that stupid, at least Miss Granger is not." Snape glanced at him sideways, "But Dumbledore would never punish students corporally, let alone treat them as roughly as you did." Tisk, tisk, tisk. Toby shook his head. "The principal is very patient. He is willing to call a student to the office for a heart-to-heart chat. But don't forget, I am not a Gryffindor after all, but a true Slytherin." Chapter 42. Quirrell has been having a very bad time recently. He lives in fear and humiliation. The humiliation came from the ridicule of the students. They did not regard Quirrell as a serious professor at all. In addition, Quirrell always had a strange smell on his body, which made them completely ignore the defense against the dark arts course and face the problem. Professor Heimer's attitude was completely different. But compared to the fear, these humiliations are nothing. Voldemort was still controlling him, and Quirrell was gradually repenting. He thought about resisting, but he had neither the ability nor the courage to fight against Voldemort. Voldemort had been possessed for so long that Quirrell had long since become terminally ill. The only good thing is that Toby hasn't been causing trouble for him lately. But the worst part was that Snape seemed to be targeting him. Quirrell hoped that this was just his illusion, because Voldemort was urging him to take away the Sorcerer's Stone again, and Quirrell did not dare to disobey Voldemort's order. He could feel that since he drank the potion taught to him by his master, Voldemort seemed to be gradually regaining his strength and there was no need to drink the unicorn's blood. But Quirrell became uncontrollably thin. He asked Voldemort what was going on, but he got the same answer every time. When you steal the Philosopher's Stone, you will return to normal, that is our shared antidote. The magic potion had long been drunk by Quirrell, and he had no choice, he had to seize the time and steal the magic stone. He knew that the Philosopher's Stone was hidden in the deepest part of the room at the end of the corridor on the 4th floor. He also knew that many professors had set up mechanisms to protect the Philosopher's Stone, including his own. But apart from that, Quirrell didn't know what the specific traps set up by other professors were, which made his hope of stealing the Philosopher's Stone slim. At the very least, he must have the time and opportunity to study those mechanisms. Under the increasing pressure of Voldemort, Quirrell had to choose a time, the dinner on Halloween Eve, which was a day celebrated by all the teachers and students in the school, and it was an excellent opportunity to make a move. The students will definitely go to the dinner, but the professors will not necessarily. Quirrell knows that he needs to distract all the professors and use something to attract their attention. The existence that threatens the safety of the students is the best. The answer is that once the safety of the students cannot be guaranteed, the professor's first priority is to deal with the threat. This will draw them all away, and Quirrell will finally have a chance to get close to the house where the Philosopher's Stone is stored. He had already figured out what to do, so he used trolls. There were still other trolls in the Forbidden Forest, and Quirrell had always been a powerful troll hunter. This came from his fantasy when he was a student, and he thought he could solve it. The Troll Man is already an extremely dazzling legendary wizard. Time passed day by day, and Harry had understood the rules of Quidditch. He worked very hard in training. This at least made the players on the same team view him differently and no longer ignored him because of the deduction of points. Ron failed to learn that wonderful magic circle. He was the only one among the few who was imprisoned for the second time. Even Neville was not as good as him. This is really strange. Ron has gradually discovered that Neville was no longer so stupid, and the number of times he was scolded by professors in class became less and less. He asked Neville about the reason, but Neville refused to reveal too much. He only said that it was because he used his own wand. But such a simple thing made Ron jealous. He was still using Charlie's old wand, and the unicorn hair was exposed. But he had no money to buy a new wand, so he had to make ends meet. Fortunately, Hermione tutored him for a long time, so Ron was not sent to solitary confinement for a third time. Ron had been afraid of this for a long time. The second solitary confinement was not as intense as the first duel, but it became even more intense. It was scary. Professor Heimer's office was scarier than a haunted house. After finally leaving, Ron was so scared that his legs went weak. He said he would work hard to learn ancient magic and never be locked up again. In addition, Hermione finally reconciled with Harry and Ron. It's hard to say how effective beating them up was. Anyway, Hermione no longer just grunted at them, but occasionally advised them to study hard. Ancient magic, especially Harry who was in training. Hermione warned him not to slack off in ancient magic classes just because of training. Slytherin's Quidditch team is the best example. But I have seen with my own eyes the misery of Marcus Flint being imprisoned. Harry was convinced of this. In fact, there was no need for him to think about it this way. Captain Wood would take the initiative to ask about their performance in the ancient magic course. He had also heard about the Slytherin team's experience, and of course he did not want his team members to do so. I made a mistake in my homework and was unable to participate in future training. Under the terrifying shadow of Professor Hemmer, the Halloween dinner is finally approaching. As the afternoon approached dusk, Quirrell quietly left the castle again. He had already arranged his own mechanism in the room to protect the magic stone. It was also a tall giant monster, which Quirrell knew early on. Knowing the troll's location in the Forbidden Forest, he didn't need to spend much effort to catch a troll and put it into the castle to attract the attention of other professors and provide cover for his sneaking in. Since he knew the route in advance, Quirrell sneaked into the Forbidden Forest very quickly. The setting sun perfectly obscured his figure, blending in with the surrounding dark trees. He walked to the end of the trail and got into the dense woods. There was almost no path for people to walk here. He was located deep in the forbidden forest. The tree crowns blocked the remaining light, and the surroundings were plunged into darkness. Quirrell is getting further and further away from Hogwarts Castle. He avoids the sharp branches and can vaguely see a hill surrounded by woods. This is also where the trolls live. This time Quirrell does not need to grasp the size anymore. The biggest troll can be used as long as it poses a sufficient threat to students. He hid in the shadows, spotted a medium-sized giant monster, and planned to lure it over with a stone. He had the ability to deal with giant monsters, but he couldn't handle them if there were too many. But at this moment, something strange happened. A small flying carpet flew out of the woods. The flying carpet was traveling very fast. Al tightened his grip on the small shovel in his hand. The troll spotted it, but it could not catch up with Al's speed. Quirrell thought he was blinded by what he saw, and in the blink of an eye, all the trolls were seduced away, including the one that Quirrell had already targeted. He felt bad, and felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity welling up in his heart. Another figure quietly approached behind Quirrell, using the crazy roars of the trolls to cover up the sound of footsteps. Quirrell turned around suddenly and saw Toby lifting a bigger shovel towards him. "Eat me again." Chapter 43. Screaming, retreating, the shoes were split open, revealing dark blue patterned socks, toes cramped, repairing the shoes. The aftermath of the attack was no different from the one before school started, except that the socks changed color. Toby looked at Quirrell suspiciously. "Why is it you again? Hasn't the mechanism to protect the Philosopher's Stone been completed yet? And it happens to be the Halloween dinner again. You don't go to the dinner, but come to the Forbidden Forest." Quirrell explained in a panic, I am preparing lessons to teach students how to defeat trolls." Fortunately, Quirrell had already thought of an excuse. He was the professor of defense against the dark arts, so he could use the content of future courses to evade suspicion. Toby immediately showed admiration. "I knew you had real talent, Professor Quirrell. The troll is a good choice, and it's time for the students to change their view of you. Wait for you to defeat them in front of them. Troll, you will definitely become a hero in their hearts. To be honest, you should choose this class as your first class, it would be much more shocking." Quirrell was stunned. Are you serious? He has always longed for attention, otherwise he would not have gone astray. "Of course." Toby said, "Don't underestimate the status of the troll in the hearts of the students. At least the troll is big enough. Think about that scene, the mountain-like troll fainted with a bang. You're still standing safe and sound, there's no cooler way to start." After a pause, Toby added, "Of course, it's still not as good as my magic circle, but it's hard to compare with it. What could be more shocking than a death performance?" Quirrell was still immersed in fantasy. He watched as Toby picked up a purple turban that was originally worn on his head in order to cover the owner's face. "Ah!" Quirrell cried out all of a sudden. He snatched the turban away and looked at Toby in fear. Toby was startled by Quirrell's reaction. "Hey, don't make such a fuss, I just want to help, although now I understand why you wear a headscarf all day long. It's okay to be bald, it's better than greasy. Long hair is better. But I can recommend you a quick and smooth hair shampoo set. This shampoo set has the effect of growing hair." Quirrell only saw Toby's mouth opening and closing, but no sound could be heard. He subconsciously touched the back of his head, but did not touch the other face, nor the scar penetrated by the shadowless curse of the divine edge. Voldemort seems to have disappeared, taking his injuries with him, but how is this possible? Quirrell quickly put on his turban and ran away without any care. Toby could not even stop him. "Hey! Professor Quirrell! I didn't expect Quirrell to be so shy. He doesn't want to be discovered that he is bald. Or does it mean that he has a stronger self-esteem? Isn't he going to hold a grudge against me?" Just as Toby was mumbling, Al sat on the flying carpet and flew back again. "Anything gained? Ah! You mean that's just an ordinary gathering point? Well, we found nothing again. We'll look for other places later. Now we have to go back quickly so as not to miss the dinner party." On the other side, Quirrell ran out of the Forbidden Forest with complicated thoughts. The plan to capture the troll failed, but at this time, Quirrell couldn't care about it at all. Where did Voldemort go? Just as he was walking through an oak forest, panic suddenly took over his mind. Quirrell subconsciously slowed down. He slowly stretched out his arm and wanted to touch the back of his head, but was stopped by a deep voice. Already? Over and over again, your plans have failed again, Quirrell, you really disappoint me. Lord Master, I... Shut up. Stop trying to fool me with your lame excuses. We must act tonight. We must, steal the magic stone. Voldemort's voice finally disappeared, and Quirrell left the Forbidden Forest tremblingly. He could not think of resisting Voldemort at all, and had no other choice. Even if there were no trolls, Quirrell would still have to break into the room protecting the Philosopher's Stone. At this moment, the students are happily gathering in the auditorium. The Halloween dinner is much more interesting than the back-to-school dinner. 1,000 bats are flying on the walls and ceiling, and there are another 1,000 bats that are like little balls. Dark clouds circled and danced above the dining table, causing the flames of the candles in the pumpkin's belly to flicker. Hermione was also in the auditorium, sitting next to Harry and Ron, and glanced up at the professor's seat. Why isn't Professor Hammer here? Hermione said in surprise, and planned to count again, but got the same result. Today is Halloween dinner. Ron complained, can't you mention something happy? Hermione glared at Ron, but Ron was really afraid of Professor Highmore. The most powerful evidence of this was that Filch had been talking about Professor Highmore's excellence recently, saying that he was what a professor should be like. Students should be disciplined so strictly. It is said that Filch's biggest wish is to visit Professor Hammer's office, which is much scarier than learning the tools used to punish students in the past. But Harry did not ignore Hermione's discovery. He also took a good look at the professor's seat and said thoughtfully, is Professor Hammer trying to steal that small package? You haven't given up on those ridiculous ideas of yours yet. Ron felt like he was almost exhausted, and he couldn't stop even after a good Halloween dinner. Harry retorted in a low voice, otherwise, why would he appear in the corridor in the middle of the night? It was the time he caught us. If there were only Snape and Filch, forget it, they must have got Malfoy's advance notice. Notice, but do you think he dares to say the same thing as Professor Hamo? Before he can frame us, he will be detained by Professor Hamo. I don't object to this. Ron said, Professor Heimer hates students who don't pay attention to the ancient magic class. Even if they chat quietly during class, they will be deducted. The strangest thing is that there is no dean. I'm going to find trouble with him, and I'm still waiting for him to have another fight with Snape. Hermione looked at the two of them with strange eyes, as if she was thinking about how she became friends with them. What do you think? Hermione said angrily, Professor Hammer's behavior could not be simpler. He is just an ordinary strict professor. His severity is not ordinary at all. Ron muttered quietly, looking like he was deeply affected by it. Harry struggled for a while. He suddenly thought that even if Professor Heimer planned to steal the small package, he could not do anything. He did not have enough evidence to report Professor Heimer, and he did not dare to violate the school rules without authorization. He had already been detained a lot. A sum of money was allocated to the college. He picked up a piece of potato, and at this moment, Professor Quirrell suddenly rushed into the auditorium. Harry realized that all three of them had forgotten about Professor Quirrell. He was also not in the professor's seat, and his presence was horribly low. Quirrell's turban was tilted on his head, and his face was full of horror. Everyone was staring at him, and they saw him walking to Professor Dumbledore's chair, leaning on the table, and gasping. The three-headed dog was out of control in the underground classroom, thought you should know. After saying that, he fell to the floor and passed out. Chapter 44. The auditorium suddenly became chaotic. Not many people know what a three-headed dog is, but Quirrell's tragic situation still scares them. Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at each other in horror. They were the few students who had seen the three-headed dog with their own eyes. The terrifying giant dog was as high as the ceiling. This must be something. A disaster. Not sure what Harry was thinking of, he murmured, I knew there must be a reason for Professor Heimer's absence. Dumbledore exploded purple fireworks on the head of his wand many times before everyone fell silent. Prefect, he said in a low voice, lead the students from each college to the dormitories immediately. After a pause, he added, everyone must sing the school song while walking. No matter what tune you use, you must sing the school song, and the prefect should take the lead. This is a method specially used to deal with Lua. Lua will fall asleep uncontrollably as soon as he hears the music. However, most students do not understand Principal Dumbledore's intention at all. Percy stood up, follow me and don't get separated, first-year students. As long as you listen to my instructions, you don't have to be afraid of any three-headed dogs. Okay, now all sing to me Hogwarts, Hogwarts. Gwarts, Hogwarts, Hogwarts, please teach us knowledge. Sing quickly, don't get separated, come with me. Whether we are bald old men or children with broken knees. Percy's face turned red, but he was still singing loudly. The students trembled and sang along with him. After a while, they realized that they were singing to the tune of Funeral March. For some reason, Percy suddenly thought of this tune. It was also the melody the twins sang at the school dinner. By the time Percy wanted to change it, it was already too late. It's really yours. Fred clapped his hands and applauded, singing Funeral March and running away at the same time. I have never seen such a creative idea. George also laughed and said, next time, the freshmen should put you on their heads. You are much more interesting than the college hat. Our minds can accept some interesting things. Shut up, you two. Percy pulled them both over with one hand. Don't think about making trouble at this time, otherwise you will suffer. Because now our brains are empty and full of air, dead flies, and trivial things. All follow me, don't get lost. Teach us something valuable. The melody of Funeral March resounded throughout the auditorium, and the other prefects were also led astray by Percy. Many young wizards subconsciously sang the school song, with uneasy expressions on their faces. I don't know. For whom the funeral is being held? Harry, who was walking in the team, grabbed the arms of Ron and Hermione, and he whispered under the cover of the singing, there must be a reason why the principal asked us to do this. I guess this is a way to deal with the three-headed dog. In order to avoid being bitten by it. You mean Funeral March? Ron was surprised. How could this be used to deal with the three-headed dog? Hold a funeral for us in advance. Why are you so stupid? Hermione said, it's singing. You can deal with the three-headed dog just by singing, no matter what tune you use. This is what Principal Dumbledore emphasized. What do you want to do? Hermione turned to look at Harry. Harry hesitated and said, maybe we should. No. Before Harry could finish speaking, Hermione interrupted him in advance. Ron looked at Hermione, then what else are you asking him for? In order to get rid of your worries in advance. Hermione said disdainfully, we were caught once not long ago, do you want to make another mistake? And then really get 50 points deducted by Dean McGonagall? But Professor Highmore is about to succeed. Harry growled, aren't so many coincidences enough? I've told you all, first at the Leaky Cauldron, and then at Gringotts, but today he didn't attend the dinner. Where do you think he will be now? We don't really need to break the school rules. Harry continued, I have already thought of an excuse. Just say that we accidentally got separated. Take a look at that room from a distance. The professors will not punish us. Ron quietly glanced at the Weasley brothers and Percy who were walking at the front, and reminded in a low voice, I think this plan is not bad. If you want to leave the team, do it now, otherwise it will be too late. Hermione was still hesitating. She thought of the collection in Professor Highmore's office. To be honest, those souvenirs did not help Professor Highmore's good impression. And Hermione already knew that Professor Highmore was deliberately hiding it from Dumbledore. The moving skull is the best proof of some things about the principal. Professor Highmore personally admitted this, and he also used skulls when delivering messages. At this time, Harry and Ron blended into a group of Ravenclaw students who were singing loudly, and then quickly hid behind a statue of a one-eyed witch. Hermione had to follow immediately. Remember, we are just taking a look from a distance. She said angrily, we must not really break into that room, otherwise nothing can be explained. Looking at Hermione who had no choice but to compromise, Harry and Ron smiled at the same time. Don't worry, Hermione. Harry vowed, this time, we can definitely reveal Professor Highmore's true face. On the other side, the professors in the auditorium immediately dispersed. Hagrid was the most anxious. He was afraid that Lua would cause some terrible consequences or be hurt. Quirrell also left the auditorium. He quietly walked upstairs, suppressing his wildly beating heart. He had no idea that he would cause such a big trouble. He originally wanted to deal with the three-headed dog in the same way as the troll. But unexpectedly, the three-headed dog was angered. He rushed out of the room guarding the magic stone and ran to the corridor. But Quirrell also understood that singing as Principal Dumbledore said was the real way to deal with the three-headed dog, and there was no need to run away even if he encountered the nasty big dog again. There is no good or evil in the world, only power, and those incompetent people who cannot gain power. Quirrell thought of Voldemort's words of temptation again. He had already concluded that Dumbledore was the incompetent person. It was really ridiculous that he would reveal such an important secret for the sake of the safety of the students. Soon, Quirrell will obtain the Philosopher's Stone, and will become a truly powerful figure, attracting the attention of countless people. He walked quickly, and after catching a glimpse of 3 figures moving in the dark from a distance, he cursed in his heart, and then quickly walked around. Did he see Harry Potter among them because he knew his secret? In the distance, Snape, who was searching Lua on the 2nd floor, suddenly turned around. He realized that Quirrell was missing, and now was the time for him to keep an eye on Quirrell. He didn't think about finding Quirrell's specific location, but strode towards the rightmost room on the 4th floor. As long as he stayed there, there wouldn't be any accidents. On the other side, Toby finally returned to the castle with Al. He stood blankly at the door of the empty auditorium, stunned for several seconds. The banquet is over so soon? No one informed us yet. Could it be that I was fired? Chapter 45. After all the students were gone, Harry and the 3 secretly went to the 4th floor. But as soon as they walked up the stairs, they heard rapid footsteps behind them. The prize room. Harry quickly reminded in a low voice. Thank God, Harry still remembered the trophy room, which was where Malfoy originally asked him to duel. The 3 of them quickly hid in the prize display room with their waist low. They quietly poked their heads out and looked into the corridor, and the person they saw was Snape. What is he doing? Harry asked in a low voice. How do I know? Hermione hissed and quickly moved their bodies closer to the room to avoid being seen. Snape did not notice the 3 of them and left directly in another direction. Harry remembered that that was also the direction of the room where the small package was hidden. A terrible guess suddenly appeared in his heart. Snape is Professor Highmore's classmate. Could it be that he went to pick up Professor Highmore? These 2 are accomplices. Come on. Hermione said impatiently, the 2 of them had a fight in school. Do you think this is something that accomplices should do? Why not? The more Harry thought about it, the more frightened he became. Have you ever heard of a professor going out to fight during class? It was obviously done for us to see, and for everyone to see, just to let others see. I know they are at odds. And why did Snape show up in Professor Hemmer's office without incident during the last solitary confinement? That might be because they were discussing a specific action plan. Ron's eyes widened. It's really yours, I can imagine this. Hermione looked at them in shock. It's true that one of you dared to make wild guesses, and the other actually believed it. It's just a random guess. We'll find out soon. Harry said as he was about to walk out of the trophy display room, but the next second he silently stepped back and made a shushing gesture to the 2 of them. The 3 of them soon heard another set of footsteps. They cautiously looked around and found that the person walking up this time was Professor Highmore, and Al also appeared on his shoulder. Did you see it? After Professor Highmore walked away, Harry said with a confident look on his face, I knew my guess was right. First, Professor Highmore lured the 3-headed dog away, and then Snape went to steal the small package. Now Professor Highmore has successfully escaped and is going to join Snape. I have a question. Ron suddenly said, why do you call Snape just Snape, but you add an additional title of Professor to Highmore? What if he hears you? Harry said quickly, it's not like you don't know how cautious Professor Hemmer is. It's always right to be careful. Ron nodded in agreement. Hermione was completely speechless, but she was surprised to find that Harry's logic was becoming more and more perfect, and even she couldn't find any point to refute. Isn't it possible that I won't have any new books to read in the future? Hermione followed them unwillingly and quietly came to the corridor, intending to find out. On the other side, Quirrell took a detour and reached the rightmost room of the corridor on the 4th floor first. But as soon as he got here, he became cautious. The 3-headed dog just now almost bit off a piece of meat from him. Fortunately, you had to dodge in time, otherwise you might be eaten alive by the 3-headed dog. There was a big hole in the wall of the room where the trapdoor was hidden, and the door had disappeared. It was broken open by a 3-headed dog. It was so dark inside that nothing could be seen clearly. Quirrell didn't dare to rush in. What if the 3-headed dog came back? He didn't know whether it would be safer to use the lighting spell or go in singing the school song. Just when he was hesitating, unexpectedly, but naturally, Snape's voice sounded from the corridor behind him, which startled Quirrell. He didn't understand why Snape came so quickly. "What are you doing?" Snape strode over with a gloomy face, and Quirrell could clearly see that he was holding the wand tightly in his hand. I'm looking for clues." Quirrell didn't look into the room anymore. He stammered and explained, I'm very good at dealing with giant monsters. I can also chase them. Maybe I can also find the three-headed dog through the same method." Snape had already walked to the opposite side of Quirrell. He stared at Quirrell closely. "Then have you found any clues? Do you know who released the three-headed dog?" "Let it out," Quirrell said with a frightened expression. "Why would you think that?" Snape stared coldly into Quirrell's eyes. Just as he was about to continue questioning, another voice came from the corridor. "I seem to have missed something." Toby walked out of the shadows and looked around at the two of them. "Can anyone explain? Why are so many people gathering here? I remember that the Halloween dinner was held in the auditorium hall." Al pointed to the broken wall and shouted twice. Toby had already noticed this strangeness. "It seems that I am not the only professor who can fight. I didn't expect you, Quirrell, to be so brave and dare to fight with Snape. In a fight, he is not that easy to deal with." He apparently mistook it for Quirrell's duel with Snape. Then he asked one more question: "Where is the three-headed dog? Is the three-headed dog still in the room?" Neither of them answered. Quirrell was secretly speculating on the purpose of Toby's appearance. Although Voldemort told him that he didn't need to worry about it, Toby happened to appear again, and they had just met in the Forbidden Forest, so they happened to interrupt Quirrell's plan to capture the troll. Snape, on the other hand, did not intend to tell Toby too much because he remembered Dumbledore's instructions. "Oops." Toby's face darkened little by little. He stared at the two of them closely and quietly tightened his grip on the wand. Al also took out a small shovel from his belly pocket and stared at them with a vigilant expression. "It's not just the three-headed dog's escape that's bad. These two people who didn't say a word made things worse. Who told them to appear at the door of the room where the magic stone was hidden?" On the other side of the corridor, the three Harrys were walking quietly with their waists low. Next to them was a long line of armor, which made them dare not walk too fast for fear of causing a tragedy during the midnight duel and causing the armor to fall. The sound of falling echoed throughout the castle again. "Did you see it?" Hermione, who was walking at the back, asked. "Did you see anyone there?" "Not yet," Harry said anxiously. "I don't dare to walk too fast, the corridor is dark, and I'm worried about bumping into them all at once." Ron, who was caught in the middle, said hesitantly, "Did you smell a familiar strange smell?" "I can't explain why it is familiar, but you..." "Stop talking." Hermione's voice trembled. She looked back and saw three huge heads appearing silently from the darkness, and the noses of each head were sniffing around. "It's a three-headed dog," Hermione warned in a suppressed tone of horror. "It remembers the smell of us. It might have been hiding at the other end of the corridor before, but now it comes to find us." Ron and Harry suddenly looked back, and just then one of the heads of the three-headed dog raised up, its ferocious eyes turning slowly towards them. Before Ron could scream, a loud singing sound came from behind the three-headed dog. Harry swore that this was the most beautiful school song he had ever heard. "Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Hogwarts. Please teach us knowledge. Whether we are an old man with a bald head or a child with a broken knee." The song was sung to the melody of Symphony of Destiny. The three-headed dog's 6 eyes drooped downwards uncontrollably. It swayed a few times, its knees softened and it knelt down, then plopped down. He fell on the floor and fell into a deep sleep. Dumbledore walked around from behind the three-headed dog, walked up to the three stunned children, and smiled gently at them. "Looks like I'm ahead in the race to catch the three-headed dog, kids." Chapter 46. Ron came back to his senses in an instant, and he stuttered, "School. Principal, we got separated, and accidentally. Let me tell you, it's time for you to go back to your dormitory." Dumbledore interrupted warmly, "Go back and have a good sleep. I'm glad no one was harmed tonight." The three people immediately realized that Dumbledore had no intention of punishing them. With Hermione's timely reminder, they ran away quickly after thanking them, as if there was a devil chasing them behind. In fact, it was almost the same, because Toby, who heard the noise, quickly arrived from the other side of the corridor, followed by Snape and Quirrell. "Severus, Quirrell." Before they could speak, Dumbledore took the lead and ordered, "Pass the news that the three-headed dog has been captured, and tell the students that they can sleep peacefully. Toby, you stay and help me handle the follow-up. Oh, and Mr. Owl, you can stay too. Snape walked away without saying a word. He walked down the stairs, which was the direction of the dormitories of Slytherin and Hufflepuff. Quirrell had no choice but to walk upstairs, where the dormitories of Gryffindor and Ravenclaw were. All in the castle tower. After they all left, Toby stepped forward and asked, "Do you want to move the three-headed dog back into the room?" Dumbledore stood in front of the sleeping three-headed dog and put it in a small cage. A three-headed dog of this size looked much cuter. "No need," Dumbledore said while holding the cage. "I will find a time to send Lua away and send him to a place suitable for his life. There is no point in letting him stay in Hogwarts." Then Dumbledore repaired the damaged room, and the debris flew back to its original position and merged into one. Finally, the broken door was reinstalled on the wall. "Come on, Toby, follow me to the principal's office." "Go to my office, Principal, it's closer." Dumbledore did not refuse Toby's proposal, and they soon arrived at the ancient magic office. Toby walked behind and closed the door tightly. When he turned around, he found Principal Dumbledore standing in the middle of the office, silently looking at the souvenirs in the room. "Speaking of which, this is the first time I have seen your numerous collections with my own eyes." Dumbledore slowly turned his gaze to the pharaoh's coffin facing the door, with scrutiny and memories in his eyes. "Is this the coffin you mentioned in your letter?" "It's this one, but the coffin is not the most important, the pharaoh's mask is. I have already placed it in the Gringotts vault. All the truly dangerous and important items are stored there." "I hope so, Toby." Dumbledore slowly sat down on the velvet sofa and placed the cage gently on the floor at his feet. Toby sat opposite him and did not answer the instructive "I hope so." Instead, he finally asked, "What happened tonight, Principal? Why did the dinner end early?" "As you can see." Dumbledore pointed to the cage and said, "Someone let Fluffy out, and the dinner had to be suspended. For the safety of the students, I also told everyone how to avoid Fluffy. This is really a disaster." Toby pondered for a while, his hair drooping down little by little to block his eyes. Severus was not the one who let Walkway go. Dumbledore clearly knew what Toby was thinking. Toby immediately pushed his hair back, his expression full of regret. "That's such a pity, I thought I could catch him myself. I didn't know you were interested in being an Auror. Just thinking about it, Principal, just thinking about it." After saying this, Toby's hair drooped down again little by little. "Do you remember where you used the Divine Edge Shadowless curse to hit the thief in the vault?" "At least the part above the neck, Principal. Every attack I make is aimed at the opponent's head. This is related to the fact that I have just left Egypt not long ago, and I haven't changed my habit yet only by completely crushing the head, those mummies. It cannot be resurrected." What a thrilling adventure story, but I believe you should already understand why I asked this question. "Yes, Headmaster, there is nothing wrong with Quirrell's head, and the back of his head is smooth. Wearing a turban is just his hobby. He is obviously not a thief who appeared in Gringotts." Toby muttered and pushed his hair back to the back of his head again, "And you should know that you can finish the sentence at once. You have to wait until my hair falls down. It is also the responsibility of a teacher to observe the changes in students." Dumbledore said in a gentle tone, "The students have already discussed your new habits, which makes you very unique." Toby abnormally did not loudly condemn the ignorant students. Instead, he murmured, "I feel that what I have done recently seems to be a bit too much. I thought about it carefully and found that the students, or most of them, students will not like such a strict principal." "Are you referring to yourself? The future Principal Hemmer?" Principal Dumbledore, can you put down the long axe in your hand first? If you are interested, I will give it to you, so that I will not worry about those ghosts in the castle all day long. Find me again." Dumbledore did not reply to Toby's words. He held the sharp long axe steadily and walked to the blood-stained black armor. Toby had obviously lied to Hermione and Cedric. The black armor was also movable. It pointed the visor in the direction of Dumbledore, as if staring at his long axe, but did not reach out to take it back, or maybe he said he didn't dare to act rashly. "I've heard your story," Dumbledore said calmly to the armor. "Would you like to do me a favor? Help me guard a room with a trapdoor. As a reward, I can save you from infinite sorrow and torture, or you can let you become a part of Hogwarts. There will be many of your kind in the corridors on the 4th floor, and you will get along very happily." The armor didn't respond, and it slowly turned its visor in Toby's direction. Toby was winking at it desperately, as if he would be unable to hold back and nod his hand for it in the next second. The black armor knelt on one knee, his head lowered. Dumbledore returned the long axe to its hand, then placed his wand on the left and right shoulders of the armor, tapped it twice, and uttered a complex and mysterious spell. The bloodstains and darkness on the armor and long axe slowly faded away, turning into silvery white, clean and shining. It stood up and saluted Toby again. Toby just turned sideways and did not accept it, but Al waved his paw happily. They watched the armor leave the office and go to the room at the end of the corridor on the 4th floor. "Any more?" Dumbledore asked. Toby's hair drooped down again at some point, and his tone was inexplicably sentimental. "No more, Principal. I never thought that on the road to pursuing ancient magic, I would find so many traces related to war. I hope it never happens again." Dumbledore sat back on the sofa, and he seemed to say inadvertently, "Really? Why do I feel that this sentence seems familiar? Oh, I remembered it, it was the 4th letter you sent in 1983. In the letter, it says this sentence 4 times. 4 times, Toby?" Toby pushed his hair back without blushing and said, "You have a really good memory. Tell me about it." Dumbledore smiled and said, "I took away a piece of your collection. What do you want me to compensate you for?" "How unpleasant compensation is." Toby quickly denied, "That's called comfort, using pain to comfort pain. Isn't this what you are always good at? Say it." Headmastership at Hogwarts. Next. Let's visit your treasure house. I have never seen all your collections. Many goblins have guessed that your wealth is amazing, but they have never been willing to store those things in Gringotts. Because most of the wealth is going to be left to Hogwarts after my death. Next. You are really generous. I guess you must have a treasure house of your own? Is it also in Hogwarts? You wouldn't be interested in those things, and even if you were, I wouldn't tell you. We are really in Hogwarts. Okay, I understand. Please quickly put down that wooden door, it is the last one." Just as Dumbledore turned his back to look at the rotting wooden door, Toby clapped his hands and said, "I thought of it." Dumbledore looked at him with a look that had already seen through Toby. Toby simply pretended not to notice, and he pretended to cough twice. "What do you think of the idea of reorganizing the teacher recognition ceremony?" Chapter 47. Early the next morning, Harry and Ron got up from the bed. They looked at each other in tacit understanding and couldn't wait to go to the common room to see if there was any result of Professor Hammer and Snape's treatment. According to Hermione's analysis last night, since President Dumbledore appeared in the corridor on the 4th floor, he will definitely have some grasp of the movements of Professor Highmore and Snape. Whether they really have a problem, just look at today. Notification is enough. The two of them walked out of the dormitory without waiting to wash up. They found that Hermione had arrived earlier than them. She was wearing pink pajamas, her long brown hair was messy, and her eyes carefully scanned the text line by line on the notice board. "No problem." After seeing the two of them appear, Hermione said happily, as if she was relieved, "Professor Highmer has no problem, I can go to him again to read the first draft that just came out." "This is impossible." Harry walked slowly to the notice board, but there were indeed no names of Professor Highmore and Snape on it, which was no different from the notice board last night. The only difference is that a distinctive notification appears. The teacher recognition ceremony will officially begin tomorrow. Students who are interested in interviewing teachers can put their name slips into the collection box, and they will eventually be randomly assigned to the professors who will be interviewed. The specific number of students will be based on the professor's wishes. After the interview is completed, students can choose their favorite professor, and the interview content will be printed in the school magazine for students' reference. The final results will be announced on Christmas and distributed to every student in the form of gifts. Teacher recognition ceremony, Ron commented, "It looks a bit like another form of college cup, but why should students be randomly assigned to professors and not let us decide who to interview? It should be to avoid the dilemma of some professors having no one to interview." Hermione had already taken out a small piece of paper and scrawled her name on it. For example, "Professor Binns, do you think there will be someone willing to interview him?" Professor Binns is a professor who teaches history of magic. He is a dead ghost. He is so old that he forgot to bring his body before class. His class is the most boring, and his voice has a hypnotic effect, so there is only students like Hermione can listen, while everyone else is basically sleeping. Ron thought for a while, I don't think Professor Binns is interested in this kind of activity at all. The specific number of students written on the notice board is based on the professor's wishes. This number may also be 0. He saw Hermione putting her name into the collection box. You signed up so soon? Who are you going to interview? It's best to be Professor Hamo. Hermione said matter-of-factly, this way I can ask him questions more directly. I never dared to do this before. I hope the professor I interview will be him. Sounds interesting. Ron regarded the interview opportunity as a token to avoid death. I want to sign up too, Harry. What about you? Harry. Only then did the two of them realize that Harry had not spoken. Harry slowly raised his head. I want to sign up. He said firmly, only in this way can we have a chance to get close to Professor Highmore and Snape. It is impossible for them to have no problems at all. Why didn't Principal Dumbledore find out? That's because they don't have any problems in the first place. Hermione said angrily, but she quickly added, if you are selected to interview Professor Hemmer, can you ask me a few questions? Both of you? Yes. After finishing breakfast, the three of them walked out of the castle together. Last night, they discovered that Hagrid was in a very strange state after hearing that the three-headed dog had escaped. He was also the first professor who couldn't help but stand up, and almost killed him. The words worry and panic were written on his face. They planned to try to see if they could find any clues. While walking on the road, the three of them had some small quarrels over the professors who were willing to be interviewed. The most important one was Principal Dumbledore. But he is already the principal. Hermione analyzed, he is not responsible for teaching any courses. On the contrary, I think the deans of each college are most likely to win the Professor Cup. According to what you say, Hufflepuff will definitely win. Ron said, Hufflepuff House has the largest number of students, and they will definitely choose Dean Sprout. They walked to the door of the cabin, and when the crying Hagrid opened the door, the three of them were shocked. Hagrid! Harry said in surprise, why are you crying? Are you sad about the teacher recognition ceremony? We will definitely vote for you. No, that's not what happened. Hagrid sobbed as he ushered them in, not forgetting to prepare tea for them. Hermione quickly stopped him and took the initiative to bring the teapot and cups. It's because of Lu Wei. As soon as the name was mentioned, Hagrid couldn't help crying loudly, blowing his nose as if he was blowing a trumpet. Lu Wei was sent away by the principal. I still remember the first time I saw him. He was so small, lying in my arms and sleeping soundly. It seemed like it happened yesterday. Hermione quickly glanced at the two of them while pouring tea. Harry and Ron reacted immediately without her having to do so. Lu Wei? Are you talking about the three-headed dog yesterday? Is that your pet? Harry couldn't believe that one day he would use the word pet to describe a three-headed dog. Yes, yes. Hagrid's tears were streaming down his face. I only had time to see it for the last time yesterday. Fortunately, it didn't suffer any harm. Otherwise, how could it survive in a strange environment? It's still alive. So small. Ron muttered in a low voice, then you don't have to worry. The only cause of death is that it ate up everything that could move and starved to death. Hermione quickly slapped Ron's arm and told him to shut up with her eyes. Harry patted Hagrid's waist hard. This was the highest position he could hit, and he suddenly understood. So, you are also one of the candidates to protect that little package, right Hagrid? Little package. Hagrid's sobbing slowly stopped. How did you know? Harry truthfully stated his suspicions, which also included his suspicions about Professor Hemmer and Snape. I know they are accomplices, Harry said confidently. This is impossible. Hagrid immediately retorted, neither Toby nor Professor Snape would be able to steal that package. Why are you so sure? I saw it all with my own eyes yesterday. Because they are also responsible for guarding the packages. They? You mean besides Lu Wei, there are other means of guarding the package? Are they also responsible for the professors? Of course, but you shouldn't know these things. Stop asking. I can't possibly tell you. Harry wanted to continue asking, but Hermione, who was quick thinking, quickly interrupted him and brought the topic to the teacher recognition ceremony. Hagrid clearly knew something about this activity. I remember that this event had been held before, and it was held by the former student group. However, as the club was disbanded, this event was no longer continued. I don't know why it is held again now and the scope has been expanded. To the whole school, not just a small club. You don't have to waste your time voting for me. Gamekeepers are not eligible to be interviewed. The minimum standard is to be responsible for a course. Hagrid couldn't help but said with longing, I wish I could become a professor at Hogwarts one day. Hermione complimented Hagrid a few times, which made him laugh. Harry saw the right moment and suddenly asked, then the professors who are qualified to participate in the event are also related to the person who guards the package? Not entirely. For example, Professor Binns, what else can you ask him to do? What exactly is hidden in the package, Hagrid? Harry's question was too obvious. Hagrid looked at him angrily. Ron next to him was startled. He quickly hid the hard rock cake in his hand and moved to sit on the ground. On top of the chair that had lost a corner, the rock cake was unscathed, but sawdust fell to the floor. This has nothing to do with you. Hagrid yelled rudely, don't try to get rid of me. This is a very dangerous thing. You should not get involved. I don't want to kill you out of curiosity. Forget about Lua. Well, it has gone away, and the things it guards should not be known to you. This is between Professor Dumbledore and Nico Flamel. Nick Flamel. Harry blinked and asked, so there is another Nick Flamel? Is that Nick Flamel's package? Hagrid angrily drove them out of the hut, and Hermione couldn't help complaining, why are you so curious? I just don't understand why they always ignore the clues right in front of them. Harry muttered dissatisfied, even if Professor Highmore is not driven away, why would Snape stay? He is so annoying. I really hope there isn't a student willing to interview him. Ron took out the rock cake that had been hidden in his arms. Here, as long as you can use this weapon to knock Malfoy unconscious, your wish will come true. Chapter 48. The interview results came out the next morning. When some students woke up, they found a small piece of paper on their pillows with the name of the professor they wanted to interview and the specific interview time on it. It's Professor Heimer. Ron's exclamation attracted the attention of several other roommates. Dean jumped out of bed and looked over Ron's shoulder at the note, it's really Professor Heimer. Then Dean stared at Ron with a complicated look. Seamus' look was exactly the same as his. Dean, Seamus, Neville, Harry, and Ron were roommates. Ron quickly noticed that something was wrong with the eyes of these two people. Why are you looking at me like that? Because that's Professor Heimer. Dean sighed and said, good luck, man. Seamus patted his shoulder comfortingly, I hope you can walk out of Professor Heimer's office alive. Don't be ridiculous. Ron pushed Seamus away impatiently, this is an interview, a legitimate interview. Professor Heimer will not do anything to me. Then Ron asked Harry as if asking for help, do you think so, Harry? The only people in the dormitory who didn't react were Harry and Neville, but Neville started looking for his pet leaf as soon as he opened his eyes, which has almost become his daily routine. Harry threw the note aside in disappointment. You also have. Ron walked over and picked up the note and took a look at it. He finally understood why Harry didn't want to talk. It turns out to be Professor Quirrell. Well, I wish you good luck too. Everyone knows how boring Professor Quirrell is. He has turned defense against the dark arts into a joke. The two came to the common room, and Hermione waved the note in her hand as soon as she saw them. It turned out that both of them had a note. Who are you going to interview? I'm Professor Heimer, Harry is Quirrell, what about you? Oops, I'm Professor Quirrell too. After getting the answer, Hermione immediately handed Ron a piece of densely written parchment. Ron said in surprise, you are finally willing to let us copy your homework? Which class is this for? Transfiguration. What are you thinking about? Hermione glared at him and quickly ordered, these are the questions I originally planned to ask Professor Heimer. Please memorize them quickly. Are you kidding? Ron was shocked. He glanced down at the question, which was as long as a 10-inch paper, and said in a positive tone, you are just kidding, and you remembered my name wrong. My name is Ron, not the second Hermione, nor Percy. I thought I heard someone calling my name. Neatly dressed, Percy walked into the common room, his prefect's badge pinned to the wizard's robe on his chest, polished to a shiny shine. He saw the note with Professor Heimer's name on it, and asked curiously, whose note does it belong to? It's mine, Ron said. Percy shook his head regretfully, and took out an identical note from his pocket. I didn't expect you to be my partner, but it's okay. Remember to find me in the common room after dinner, and I'll bring you. You go to the ancient magic office. Shut up. Ron said, Don't speak to me in such a commanding tone. Why not? I am your brother and a prefect. Do you know how to interview a professor? Percy dusted off the prefect badge on his chest. At least a prefect is always better than a freshman. Experienced. While the two were arguing, Percy's words reminded Harry that he didn't know what preparations to make. In order to avoid disturbing the normal teaching, they did not have much time to interview the professor. Okay. Faced with Harry's pleading look, Hermione reluctantly agreed, I just need to make more preparations. I hope the African prince that Professor Quirrell said is true. This will make the interview more interesting. A little more interesting. Professors are mostly interviewed in the evening, that is, after dinner. When Ron returned to the common room after dinner, Harry and Hermione had already set off. Ron watched with disgust as Percy wiped the prefect badge over and over again. Are you done yet? When Percy was about to wipe off his prefect badge for the 7th time, Ron finally couldn't help but said, Are you going to blind Professor Hemmer's eyes with it? Percy put down the tissue, and when he picked up the interview parchment and quill, Ron saw his hands trembling. Are you nervous? Ron asked suspiciously. How is that possible? Percy laughed twice, further confirming Ron's guess. Ron was silent for a while, and he muttered in a low voice, Actually, I am also a little scared, after all, I have been detained twice. The two people looked at each other silently, both showing some sympathy for each other. That is Professor Heimer, who is known as the Devil. How could anyone not be afraid of him? No matter how expressive Percy was, he would not dare to maintain order in Professor Hemmer's class, because no one in the ancient magic class dared to disrupt order, and even the students of Slytherin House behaved well. Headmaster Snape would never stand up for them on matters related to the ancient magic classes. In other words, Professor Heimer's terror has spread to other professors. Percy and Ron left the common room in silence. This was almost the best moment of the relationship between the two brothers in their lives, and this emotion reached its peak in front of the door of the ancient magic professor's office. They looked at each other one last time, and then Percy knocked softly on the door. Please come in. Professor Heimer's voice came from inside the room. Percy pushed the door open, and Ron followed him cautiously. The ancient magic office was still the same, filled with strange collections everywhere. This was Percy's first time in this office, and he was startled by the pharaoh's coffin staring at the door. Only Ron knew that the atmosphere today was already very good. At least the lights were bright enough and there was less sense of prying eyes. Even the collection was missing one piece, the black armor was no longer there. I hope that there will be more collections in the future. Could be less. They walked to the desk, and Toby was staring at the two of them. His hair was neatly pushed back behind his head, but both of them knew that this did not mean that Professor Hemmer was easy to mess with. His state had been erratic. Percy was about to tell the reason for coming, but Toby spoke first. Mr. Weasley and Mr. Weasley, what would you like to drink? Oh. Ron was stunned. It turned out that you could drink in the ancient magic office. This was completely different from when he was in solitary confinement. In the end, the two of them reluctantly asked for 2 glasses of pumpkin juice. They didn't dare to ask too much. Toby smiled slowly. It seems that you are here to interview my students, so let's start now. Ron noticed that there was something wrong with Professor Heimer today, not only compared to when he was in solitary confinement, but also slightly different when facing outstanding students. In short, he seemed more approachable. Percy was careful not to speak, but Ron once again used his special skill, moving his mouth faster than his brain. Did anything good happen today, Professor? Toby turned his attention to Ron, and Percy was so nervous that he broke into a cold sweat. He came up with many plans to escape with Ron in an instant, but Ron in each plan would greatly increase the chance of failure. There is indeed a good thing. Toby smiled and said, because the probation period is here. Probation period? Ron asked curiously, didn't you already pass the professor's probation period? Toby stretched out a finger and shook it left and right. It's not my probation period, but yours. It's the student's probation period. Let the interview begin. It's time for you to see my true face. True face? Ron blinked in confusion. Was it the real face that Harry was referring to? Doesn't this mean that today is the day of his death? Chapter 49. Facts soon proved that Ron was wrong. Percy straightened his back and said cautiously, can you tell me what this probation period means, Professor? Sure. Toby said with a smile, as if waiting for Percy to ask himself. You should have taken many courses, Mr. Weasley. And as a new student, Mr. Weasley, you should also have learned a lot. If you have compared it, you will know that magic circle is a very dangerous knowledge. I have said a long time ago that ancient magic is an extremely dangerous course. Logically speaking, this course should not be taken in the first grade. Even the magic circle, the danger of the magic circle is not only does it come from the summoning of terrifying creatures I mentioned, and the terrifying changes that students themselves may face, but there is also the most basic danger, that is, when you draw the wrong magic circle, it is very likely that you will explosive. This is an extremely precise knowledge that does not allow for any mistakes, and it is more complicated than simply casting a spell. To this end, I have adopted a series of teaching methods. For example, at the beginning, I only asked you to carve on parchment. The magic circle, because different carrying materials have different powers, can minimize the consequences of mistakes. Besides that, I have a harsh attitude towards you. It turns out that this is very useful. At least it gives me hope to continue the ancient magic course. You all have the ability to deal with such a complicated course. That's why I said, your probation period is up. Ron looked at Percy confused, but he didn't understand a word he said. But Percy couldn't help but get excited. So, do you mean that now that the trial period has arrived, we will have the opportunity to learn more and more complex magic circle knowledge? Indeed. Toby nodded and said, if it is only used on parchment, I naturally don't have to put in so much effort. The magic circle has many applications, and it can even replace the wand. I have seen them all with my own eyes. In the lost city of Loch Ness that I talked about in class, the wizards there barely use wands and can maintain their daily lives with magic circles alone. I have made many guesses about this phenomenon. For example, are those wizards forced to use the magic circle, just like they have no choice but to live in hiding, but there is no need to record this part. He reached out and held down the quill that Percy was writing with, so as not to cause unnecessary trouble. As I said, these are just guesses. But I can tell you some directions for the next courses. He briefly described the application of magic arrays in the Lost City, which almost took care of all aspects. There were even some advanced magic arrays that could be automatically triggered without the need for a wand. The more Percy listened, the more he longed for such a magical world. He knew very well what changes the magic circle would bring to the magical world, and he had the same idea as Cedric. Ron, on the other hand, became more and more frightened as he listened. How could they still have so much knowledge to learn? This is really terrible. After getting off to a good start, the topic naturally led to the adventures Toby had experienced, that is, his archaeological life. It's just that the way he showed it was a bit unique. As for the attitude towards ancient magic, I always believe that the most important thing is to remain vigilant. And when it comes to describing ancient magic, the only thing that never changes is danger. He rolled up one trouser leg and showed the scarred calf to Ron and Percy. At the same time, he introduced, "Did you see this darker skin? This is frostbite, only the necrotic ones. The parts had to be torn off to avoid spreading. I suspected it was a fatal curse. Fortunately, I reacted in time enough to survive. As for this small whirlpool-shaped scar, it is related to a desert. Once it falls into it, it will absorb water from the body like crazy, so it will form such a special injury. There are also these spots, which look like freckles, but are actually related to some dangerous magical animals. The situation at that time was very critical. If Al hadn't been there, I would have been dead, even a scum. There won't be anything left." Ron and Percy had never seen such a terrifying calf. Not only them, but even Dumbledore was silent for a long time while treating Toby's injury. "That's why you see this pharaoh's coffin facing the door," Toby explained after the introduction, "because I hope everyone who comes in can remember that once the boundaries of ancient magic are crossed, death is always watching you." "Your previous job was as a curse breaker at Gringotts?" Ron asked frightenedly, trembling with fear. "You can say that." Toby smiled, "But I prefer to call myself an archaeologist." Ron looked at Percy. "What should I do with Bill? I remember he was also a curse breaker. I never knew this job was so dangerous." "I don't know either," Percy murmured. "Bill Weasley is the eldest child of the Weasleys and is respected by all his younger siblings. Mom will go crazy. I really want to say that not all curse breakers face this kind of risk, only in rare cases." Toby paused and asked, "But who is the Bill you are talking about?" Bill is now working for Gringotts in Egypt. He is also a curse breaker. But Toby has no memory of such a person. He was originally a top curse breaker and spent most of his time in ancient ruins. I rarely have the opportunity to contact my colleagues, so I obtain necessary information from fairies. So that's it. Toby nodded. I don't mind writing a letter to the Goblin Master of Gringotts in Egypt. You can also contact the Veil Bar. There are not many students who would choose to work as a curse breaker. Even if there are more, I can introduce them. It's just a small favor. Ron and Percy looked at Toby with much more respect. They finally discovered that Professor Highmore was not that scary at all, and was even extremely approachable. You know, they were just students, but Highmore. The professor did them a big favor that even Mr. Weasley couldn't do. Thank you so much. Percy said excitedly. Only Ron had the time to look at the only scar on Toby's calf that had not been introduced. It looked like it had been cut with a knife, sharp and sharp. Then he asked without thinking. Severus did it when I called him out in potions class that day. Toby's answer shocked the two of them. But don't worry, Severus and I have been very good friends since we were in school. There will always be some conflicts between friends, you think so, right? Of course. Percy nodded subconsciously, and manually nodded twice for Ron, crossing out this part of the interview. Before leaving, Ron couldn't help but ask one last question. Professor, why do the results of the most popular professor have to be announced on Christmas, or in the form of a gift? It was my idea because I wanted every student in the school to receive a Christmas gift, no matter who they are. Are there still people who don't get Christmas presents? How is that possible? In Ron's mind, it was impossible for such a person to exist. He even knew in advance the gift that Mrs. Weasley would give him, a sweater specially made by the Weasley family. Percy didn't have time to stop Ron, he could only stare at Professor Highmore nervously. But Toby just smiled indifferently, but this time his smile was much more sincere than anything the two of them had seen before. That's why I hope every student can receive a Christmas gift. Everyone. Chapter 50. The school newspaper reporting the interview was quickly printed, thanks to the help of Principal Dumbledore. After all, Toby did not have many acquaintances in the British wizarding world. Professor Binns was indeed the only professor who did not accept an interview. He did not care about anything other than teaching. Dumbledore also did not accept an interview because he was no longer responsible for teaching. However, the school newspaper still printed more than 30 pages, and every student had a copy, including professors. This also included faculty members who were not responsible for the curriculum, such as the librarian, Mrs. Pants, and the gamekeeper. Hagrid, and Filch, the castle administrator. Fortunately, the school newspaper only needs to be published once a year. Otherwise, no matter how prestigious the principal is, he would not be able to draw too much money from the pockets of the school board. This is not because the school board does not support President Dumbledore's decision, but because they have learned a lesson about the school newspaper, and this lesson was related to a student named Gilderoy Lockhart. When Lockhart was in school, he asked the principal to start a school newspaper, just to see his name printed in it. Since then, the board of directors has been somewhat cautious in making decisions about the school newspaper. Since the current school newspaper only needs to be printed once a year, and the special significance of this interview is to strengthen the connection between students and professors, this is also the reason why President Dumbledore will fight for the opportunity. He believes that this kind of connection is very rare. The printing of this school newspaper is very exquisite, and it can even be regarded as an instruction manual related to professors, and the name is more simply Hogwarts Teacher Recognition Club School Newspaper. In this series of interviews, each professor has a completely different style and different content. Dean Flitwick is a very interesting professor. He generously told the story of his participation in the duel competition, including how he won the championship that year. He believed that Professor Highmore's concept of reducing the level of magic had some truth, because he had continued to pay attention to the duel competition, and the occurrence of powerful ancient magic was indeed becoming less and less. Professor Flitwick also told an interesting story about the sorting ceremony. He was almost sorted into Gryffindor House, and Professor McGonagall was also almost sorted into Ravenclaw House. Their college life. They almost fell into each other's path, so the two of them also discussed whether the other almost became the dean of another college. Both of them found this possibility very interesting. Finally, Professor Flitwick also encouraged those students who were not valued or even discriminated against. He used himself as an example since birth. he has become a second-class figure in the wizarding world because of his physical characteristics. Waiting for citizens, and ever since he stepped into Hogwarts Castle, he has been constantly scrutinized by the people around him. In the end, Professor Flitwick believed that these looks were not purely malicious, but more caused by ignorance. People want the people around them to be simple enough so that they can understand each other more easily and be understood. Want to make these people. Acknowledging the idea that people are complex is difficult. Headmaster Sprout of Hufflepuff is a professor of herbology and has a wealth of knowledge. Most of her interviews are related to interesting plants, such as the dancing yarrow flower and the starry night tree that looks like a star map once it blooms. Flower. In addition, she also mentioned her friendship with Professor McGonagall, whom she had known since they were in school. According to her, Professor McGonagall has always been the most outstanding student in the same grade. Professor McGonagall also mentioned Dean Sprout and praised her as a very tolerant person. Professor McGonagall also talked about some knowledge related to transfiguration. Fortunately, she did not turn this interview into a. It was a thorough class, and she also talked about some of her life in the Ministry of Magic. Professor McGonagall worked in the Ministry of Magic for a period of time after graduation, and did not return to Hogwarts until later. Apart from these things, the thing she mentioned the most was Quidditch. She was a member of the Gryffindor Quidditch team when she was in school and participated in an extremely important game in 7th grade. The result of the game will determine the Quidditch Cup. As a result, Professor McGonagall suffered a concussion and several broken ribs due to the opponent's foul. The interview also mentioned that Professor McGonagall's eyes burst out with anger when she said these words. She shouted Gryffindor must win several times in the office, and finally expressed her disapproval of this year's leader. I'm looking forward to the Dodgers season. According to a student who happened to pass by the office, he also heard the shouts of the interviewer, and was very sure that the people interviewing Professor McGonagall were Wood, the current captain of the Gryffindor team, and Angelina, the team's chaser. Johnson. The atmosphere in the entire office was ignited. The interesting thing is that Snape expressed his disdain for the Gryffindor team in the interview, and did not think anyone could shake Slytherin's momentum to win this year's Academy Cup. Prior to this, Slytherin Academy had already won 6 games. A consecutive championship. During the interview, he praised Slytherin House very much, and by the way, he also mentioned his yearning for the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. He seemed to have inadvertently mentioned that he had applied for this position for many years, but had been unable to do so. None of them got what they wanted. And when the question came to Tobyheimer, a former old classmate, Snape immediately went out of character and belittled Professor Highmore, making the two of them seem like sworn enemies. Coincidentally, right after the last Dean's interview is an interview with the Professor of Ancient Magic Tobyheimer. This interview is the most shocking. Professor Highmore explained the reason for being so harsh at the beginning, because he did not think that students, especially freshmen, could accept ancient magical knowledge well, so the requirements were so strict the result surprised him. The students actually did it. Under the dual threat of tutors and pre-class tests, the students were able to perfectly remember the magic circle taught by Professor Highmore. Even Marcus Flint did it all successfully. Moreover, the students also knew another reason for Professor Highmore's harshness, which was derived from his personal experience. Although it was impossible to take pictures due to limited conditions, the students could not see the injury on Professor Highmore's leg with their own eyes, but from written narratives alone, we can learn about the dangers of ancient magic, almost all of which were fatal. Professor Highmore may be the only archaeologist to survive. In addition to Professor Highmore, there is another professor who has attracted a lot of attention, Professor Quirrell. Hermione's preparations were very complete. She no longer struggled with Professor Quirrell's identity as a professor of defense against the dark arts. Instead, she asked him about his experience as a professor of Muggle studies. In Hermione's opinion, this course was really interesting. For example, the description of the aircraft Super Large Steel Owl. Another student interviewed, Harry, expressed deep sympathy for Professor Quirrell's experience as a student. He could completely understand Professor Quirrell's thoughts because he himself grew up under bullying. Finally, he encouraged Quirrell. The professor will definitely realize his dream, just like the day when Harry discovered that he was actually a wizard. In Quirrell's life, apart from the sorting ceremony, this was the first time that he received so much attention. The belief also wavered little by little. Chapter 51. The emergence of the school newspaper gave students a completely new impression of some professors, not only Professor Highmore, but also Quirrell. Muggle-borns will be interested in Quirrell's Muggle Studies courses, and more people will sympathize with his past experiences. The most obvious change is that the students who laugh at him in class become more and more less, and the fact that Quirrell just happened to talk about a more useful spell, the repelling spell, which can be used to repel enemies, made him look more like a serious professor. Professor McGonagall also specifically chatted with Quirrell, because Quirrell mentioned in the interview that Dean McGonagall's concern was the main reason why he became a professor. The two talked for a long time, and finally found out about Quirrell's complex psychology. End the conversation. This is completely different from what Quirrell thought. Harry was chosen by the interviewer on his own initiative, ostensibly because he admired the boy who lived, but in reality it was because he wanted to take this opportunity to get to know Harry and help his master understand his weaknesses. As for Hermione, it was because she was Harry's friend, and her presence might make Harry more relaxed. But Quirrell didn't expect that in the end he would gain sympathy from Harry and Hermione, who also promised to vote for Quirrell after the school newspaper came out. Not only the two of them, but also some other students also said they would vote for Quirrell after class. Unknowingly, Quirrell's vision seemed to have been achieved to gain the respect of the students and the recognition of others. Although this is still far from what Quirrell desires, what if he also defeats the troll himself in front of the students? Then will he get more respect? Quirrell couldn't help but recall Toby's suggestion, and the belief in his heart was once again shaken. Dealing with trolls is his specialty, and it's much easier than stealing the magic stone. Quirrell was sitting alone in the office, his scarf still exuding a strange smell. He later peeked at the back of his head and found that the master's face was indeed no longer there, and the master's voice had indeed not appeared since Halloween. Quirrell couldn't help but wonder whether the possession of Voldemort had really ended. And that time at the Halloween dinner was Voldemort's words delivered through other forms of magic. Originally Quirrell had another plan, which was to interfere with Harry Potter's broomstick at the upcoming Quidditch match so that he would fall to his death in full view of the public. This would also solve the master's biggest enemy, at least Quidditch. Leo thinks so. But this time, Quirrell couldn't help but get entangled. Not only because this plan is too risky, after all, there are other professors watching the game, especially Tobyheimer, who has blocked his plan many times. What if the result is the same this time? Manage? On the other hand, it's because Quirrell can't help but want to get the title of most popular professor. Even if this hope is slim, Quirrell still wants to wait a little longer, at least until Christmas comes. Wait until the final results are announced. He desires fame more than anything else. It was precisely because of this desire that he tried to find Voldemort. Now, because of the same desire, Quirrell boldly came up with a plan to escape Voldemort's control. It doesn't take long to escape, just waiting until Christmas is enough. Owner. Quirrell asked tentatively, "Master, are you still there?" He waited for a long time in fear, but did not get an answer. The interviews in the school newspaper are great, but they don't satisfy everyone. Since the interview with Professor Hemmer, Percy has taken over all the work of organizing the articles to prevent the fast-talking Ron from accidentally writing something that shouldn't be written. Ron was naturally happy to see the scene. Writing papers was the most annoying thing for him, let alone reporting. But after that, he had been deliberately avoiding Hermione. Harry didn't understand why he did this, and Ron hesitated and didn't dare to tell the reason. It wasn't until the day the school newspaper was officially printed that an angry Hermione finally found Ron, who was eating chicken drumsticks in the auditorium. Not even one. Hermione was so angry that she couldn't speak. "I know you can't remember so many questions, so I deleted a lot of them in advance, but you didn't ask any of them." "Not a single one." Ron quickly hid behind Harry, and he defended in a low voice, "Do you know how scary the scene was? As soon as we saw the injury on Professor Hemmer's calf, Percy and I were both frightened and speechless. Here you go. You really should see it with your own eyes. Do you think it's appropriate to ask the questions you requested at that time? This is too cruel." "Nice counterattack," Harry couldn't help but say. Hermione was stunned for a moment. She quickly opened the school newspaper to the page where Professor Hemmer was interviewed, and read it carefully again. Then she sat down next to the two of them without saying a word, picked up a piece of pie and ate it. Harry guessed that Ron's words probably had an effect, and Hermione began to feel guilty. She only wanted to satisfy her curiosity, but she did not think that those questions would probably involve Professor Hemmer. Of hurtful experience. Harry quickly gave Ron a look to tell him not to talk nonsense at this time, and then he asked Hermione with concern, "Are you okay?" "It's not good at all." Hermione said sadly, I have promised to vote for Professor Quirrell. What should I do if Professor Hammer finds out? Students can't cheat on the poll because if they do, the collection boxes will bite their hands until the professor frees them. Neville made this mistake once. He wanted to vote for Professor Hammer, plus his own and his parents' votes. As a result, he was bitten on the wrist by the collection box and left in the public restroom. She yelled for a long time. Not enough, but he didn't explain why he had to vote 3 times in total. Others just thought he accidentally remembered it. Harry racked his brains and comforted him, don't worry anymore. Professor Hammer likes students with outstanding performance like you the most. He won't care about such trivial matters as voting. Really? Ron asked, since when did you know Professor Hammer so well? Harry ignored Ron and continued, and we have many other important things. Think about it, Hermione. We haven't figured out who Nick Flamel is yet, and the Quidditch season is over. It's about to begin, this is us well, it's one of the few opportunities for me to make a comeback, and all the points I deducted before have to be earned back through the competition. As soon as he said this, Harry became extremely nervous. Ron bit the chicken leg and said, you are really good at comforting people. Not only are you doing the other person a disservice, but you can also get yourself into trouble as well. Harry glared at him angrily, and Ron smiled and handed him an untouched chicken leg. I'm just kidding, you will definitely perform well in the competition, everyone knows this. Unfortunately, Ron wasn't very good at comforting people. Under this heavy expectation, Harry suddenly became even more nervous. You too, ugh. Hermione sighed deeply, wiped her hands clean, stood up and said, today is the day when the new first draft comes out. I went to see Professor Hammer. I hope he really doesn't mind so much. If he asks, I don't know how to answer. Chapter 52. Hermione soon discovered that she was thinking too much. The moment she opened the door of the ancient magic office, she even forgot about her worries just now, and focused all her attention on the magnificent scenery in front of her. The entire office turned into a view of the bottom of the lake. The edge of the lake was inlaid on the edge of the door frame, and not a trace flowed outside. Of course, this was not real water. Hermione had seen it as early as the first ancient magic class. She had to go through the illusion created by the magic ball, otherwise she would have screamed out loud. But this time the fantasy was completely different from the last time. What they saw in class was the lake and the water monster, but this time it was a real lost city. This was the first time Hermione had seen it in a book. The city under the lake described is not only extremely old in style, far inferior to Hogwarts Castle, let alone ordinary houses today, but the entire city has long been turned into a ruin, and the walls are covered with green algae and water plants. Professor Heimer was standing in front of a house in the lake. This house was made of a huge stone. It was obviously the power of magic that was used to fuse the stones into one. Hermione saw a faint magic circle imprinted on the wall of the stone house, which was almost unclear and somewhat incomplete. This magic circle appears the most often in the city of Loch Ness. Toby, who had his back to Hermione, suddenly said, Miss Granger, you should know the function of this magic circle. Hermione quickly answered, I guess it's a magic circle to avoid the current, Professor, otherwise wizards wouldn't be able to live underwater for a long time. Toby turned around with a smile, and the illusion around him gradually dissipated, turning back into a magic ball floating around him. Al, who was sitting on his shoulder, nodded affirmatively. Correct answer. Toby walked behind the desk and sat down. Hermione sat opposite him as usual, and soon a stack of parchment floated in front of her. But Hermione didn't pick it up and read it immediately. She first glanced at the howling potted plant, and the black armor next to it disappeared as Ron said. When she looked back again, she found Professor Heimer looking in the same direction. It seems that Mr. Weasley is observing very carefully. Toby simply thought about it and knew the reason why Hermione did this. The 2 confinement experiences were indeed worthwhile for him. At least he was deeply impressed by the layout of the office. Hermione didn't know if Toby was teaching Ron a lesson. Judging from the expression on the professor's face, it didn't seem like that. The next time was spent in silence, with only the sound of Hermione flipping through parchment and Toby's continuous writing as he prepared more course materials in the office. As for Al, he is the most laid back, sitting on the flying carpet and flying around, or jumping on the collections and wiping them carefully with a handkerchief. The house elves responsible for cleaning are extra. I have ordered not to tamper with these collections, so as not to cause unnecessary trouble. After checking all the typos in the first draft and memorizing the above content many times, Hermione said good night, Professor, and left. Hermione was walking alone in the long corridor, and she suddenly realized that she didn't worry about voting later because Professor Heimer never asked her about it. Professor Heimer seems to have indeed changed, just as reported in the interview. He no longer exudes that oppressive atmosphere. This is also how the students felt the next day. Starting today, we will learn more about the magic circle. Toby looked at the students below and said, "You have mastered a partially complete magic circle and its composition, but this is only the beginning. You've already seen the magic ball." The silver ball with golden patterns floated above the podium, and there was countless yearning in the eyes of the little wizards. They had long wished that they could have a magic ball, so that they would not have to worry about homework or before class. Detected. The magic ball is an extremely complex creation and is almost impossible to reproduce. This also leads to the limitations of the magic circle. For example, it cannot be used in duels. After all, the enemy will not wait for you to finish drawing the magic circle before attacking. But you can still create your own magic ball. It doesn't have to be spherical. It can also just have a few magic circles engraved on it. As for the specific materials, my personal suggestion is to use the ones you can use first. Let's start with the wood for making wands. It's best to use a wand that matches yours, that is, your own wand wood bought from Mr. Ollivanders. This wood is the most suitable for you. But I don't want you to provoke the trees in the school, especially the Forbidden Forest, because of this. I also don't want to see you carving magic circles on your bodies. Don't forget, once the carving is wrong, the magic circle is very likely to explode. Yes, this behavior is no less dangerous than creating a spell. After giving the warning, Toby carefully observed the students' reactions. Their little faces were pale with fright, and most of them were imagining the scene of them suddenly exploding. That was really disgusting. Very good. Toby said with a satisfied smile, "It seems that you already know the taboos in the application of magic circles, so I don't need to show you similar pictures." Any pictures? Several students were stunned, and more were restraining themselves from continuing to think about it. However, apart from taboos, magic circles are still widely used. For example, the collection boxes placed in various common rooms are made of magic circles and can bite the wrists of disobedient students. Furthermore, in the magic circle system, as long as you can engrave a small enough magic circle, and then put all these magic circles on a wand would, think about what you can do, a fully automatic. The magic wand is just like this, no wand gestures or spells are needed, just the simplest infusion of magic power, and you can successfully cast any magic. A wand that casts magic automatically. The little wizards were all shocked. This is a problem that the magic world has never been able to completely solve. It has existed for thousands of years. Since the birth of the magic wand, there have been wizards longing for a wand that can fully automatically perform magic. Magic wand. After seeing the reactions of the little wizards, Toby's smile suddenly became more satisfied. "So, do you want to learn more about magic circles?" The little wizards nodded repeatedly for fear of falling behind. "Do you want a wand that casts magic automatically?" The young wizards nodded as fast as ever, but the expressions on a few people's faces suddenly froze. Why did this series of questions and answers feel so familiar? Very good. Toby showed a big smile. Then let's start with the relationship between the size and power of magic arrays. This also includes the fact that the composition of magic arrays of different sizes is not exactly the same. There will be more knowledge to learn later. The cooperation and coordination between different magic arrays transforms all existing spells into the form of magic arrays. He listed a lot of knowledge points, and the faces of the little wizards were even uglier than when they heard that they might explode. One of the little wizards raised his hand tremblingly and asked, "Excuse me, Professor, do you need to learn all this knowledge in one semester?" No, 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 no. Toby shook a finger from side to side. "This knowledge is too advanced for you, just a brief taste is enough. It would be great if you can make a bite box during the exam." "Oh no, it is a collection box." Although they unexpectedly learned the true name of the collection box, the students still discovered that Professor Heimer was unexpectedly nice today. Not only did he not leave a lot of homework for them, but he also cancelled the pre-class test and also responded to the questions asked by the students. Almost all questions were answered, showing extraordinary patience. Toby's assignment today is to hand in a paper on a creative application of a magic circle, no matter what it is, a toy, a crucible, or the fully automatic magic wand taught in class. Exuding imagination is much more interesting than looking up information. They watched Professor Heimer walk out of the classroom, and many people couldn't help but cast their eyes on the calf under the witch robe. They had all read the interview and knew that Heimer. There were countless injuries on the professor's body, and many girls were still secretly discussing whether to catch up so they could ask Professor Heimer how he took care of his face. Toby walked back to the office with a smile. He was very satisfied with the results of today's course. The application of magic circles must always radiate imagination and cannot be as strict as before, otherwise it will restrict the students. While pushing the door open, Toby sighed to Al, "I am really a good professor, better than Severus. What's wrong with me?" Chapter 53. A cold voice came, and an uninvited guest appeared in the ancient magic office. Snape came to the office at some unknown time and did not greet Toby in advance. "Who do I think I am?" Toby closed the door and said, "It turns out he is my sworn enemy." This is almost what Snape called Toby in the interview, but he didn't say it explicitly. Toby walked to the velvet sofa and sat down. He looked out the window. It was still morning. "Are you here to drink with me?" Toby obviously didn't take Snape's interview seriously. He conjured up 2 glasses of lemonade and said, "It's better to drink these things. I don't want to go to class drunk in the afternoon." Snape sat down opposite Toby. "Teacher recognition ceremony." He mocked, "What are you going to do with the teacher recognition ceremony? Are you going to use the name of the most popular professor to improve your impression in the minds of students? So that you can successfully become the future principal?" Tisk, tisk, tisk. Toby raised another finger and shook it, and Al flicked his tongue at Snape in disgust. Toby didn't explain. He asked, "What are you here for today?" "Not to mention visiting my collection, but if you are really interested, you can take the magic weapon coffin away and lie down in it to sleep. It's quite comfortable." Snape stared directly at Toby, his mouth twisted unnaturally. Toby continued, "Or do you plan to talk to me about James' child? The Quidditch season is approaching, and you are worried that he will be as good as James, and you feel nervous." Snape's expression suddenly became much gloomier, and his eyes narrowed slightly, revealing a dangerous tone. "Oh, come on." Toby suddenly became as disgusted as Al. "Is it so difficult to say it outright? You don't have to worry about the injury. The traces left by black magic are almost indelible. You should be glad that it is just. It left scars on my body instead of actually making me crippled. I have never been lucky." Snape snorted coldly and strode out of the office. "Worried that Harry is as good as James at Quidditch?" This was obviously just an unintentional remark made by Toby, but unexpectedly it came true in front of all the teachers and students in the school. On the Quidditch pitch on Saturday, in Harry Potter's first game, he caught the snitch beautifully and quickly, but for Marcus Flint who hit him hard in the middle. The schedule of the entire game can be shortened further. Deservedly the best. Commentator Lee Jordan grabbed the microphone hard and shouted, "Even the Slytherin players can't find anything wrong." Their faces all turned the color of pig liver. "Hurry! Someone quickly film this scene. I want to. This photo hangs above my bed, and I have sweet dreams about their humiliation every day." Even Professor McGonagall no longer stopped Lee's nonsense. As a first-year seeker, Harry's performance was really outstanding. His flying skills were far from those of a person who had just touched a broomstick. "How long have you been a Muggleborn?" Whoops! Toby almost forgot that he was sitting next to Snape. As expected, Snape's face was twisted with anger, and there was endless anger in his eyes. Toby had no choice but to turn his head and look at Quirrell on the other side. "What a wonderful game, what do you think?" Quirrell quickly hid the expression on his face and nodded, pretending to be excited. After all, he still didn't dare to mess with Harry's broom during the competition, not only because Toby was there, but also because he didn't want to cause any additional trouble before the results of the vote for the most popular professor came out. He still longed for this honor. Fortunately, Voldemort didn't come out to give him orders again, otherwise Quirrell wouldn't have dared to pretend that he didn't dare to do anything. After this wonderful game, Harry was officially cleared of being deducted a large amount of points. Everyone could see his potential, and maybe they could even hope that Gryffindor would win this year's Quidditch Cup. If you ask me, this is a great thing. In the cabin, Hagrid entertained Harry, Ron, and Hermione. He was still trying to persuade him, "You should not pursue Nick Flamel anymore, in case you accidentally get detained again." What to do with the score? The 3 of them exchanged glances, and finally Harry asked, "Hagrid, since Lu Wei is gone, is there still a guard in that room? What if the thief is really in the school? Hagrid put down the teapot heavily. This is none of your business, but I can tell you clearly that Lu Wei left, but Principal Dumbledore quickly got help from Toby. Now you understand, right? The principal trusts Toby, otherwise it would not be possible for him to set up a second mechanism. On the way back to the castle, the three of them were still discussing the news. So, at least Professor Heimer is not suspected. Ron said, the reason why you suspected Snape before was because he was a classmate of Professor Highmore. If Professor Highmore has no suspicion, then neither does Snape. Yes, Harry. Hermione also expressed her thoughts. You should have read Professor Heimer's interview, and you know clearly that he is not that kind of person. Harry looked at the two of them suspiciously. I really hope this is just my imagination, but why are you all talking for Professor Heimer? Because only you will think he is a bad person. Ron said, both Percy and I have received a reply from Bill. He really got help from Professor Heimer, and his work is going very smoothly now. I have been to Professor Heimer's office so many times. Hermione said, all his behavior was explained in the interview, except for a little trivial hobby. Hermione was referring to the two moving skeletons, but their heads had not yet been attached. Harry didn't bother to explain to the two of them. He had another worry that he hadn't revealed to them the Sorting Hat had considered sorting him into Slytherin, but just in time, he showed up at the Leaky Cauldron early. Professor Heimer is a Slytherin. Harry had been worried that he might know something, maybe he had seen the secret in advance. But Harry did not dare to tell anyone about this matter, because Hagrid told him in Diagon Alley that the mysterious man was a Slytherin, which made Harry resist this academy from the bottom of his heart, and he did not want to be. Consider yourself a member of Slytherin. In other words, even if there was no such thing as a small package, Harry still wanted to investigate Professor Heimer carefully. He had already thought of the clues. Nearly Headless Nick said some incomprehensible words at the opening dinner, and he obviously knew something. This may also include the true face of Professor Heimer. Chapter 54. Harry hid all his thoughts deep in his heart. As soon as he returned to the castle, he found an excuse to separate from the two of them and wandered around the castle. Finally, he found the transparent figure in the armor corridor on the 4th floor. Nick! Nick! Harry yelled and ran over, and Nick backed out of the wall in confusion. Do you have a problem with me? He asked. Harry recounted what happened at the opening dinner again, hoping to get a more specific description from Nick. So that's what happened. Nick smiled and said, did you come to me because you couldn't understand Professor Heimer's interview? This is normal. I have also read that interview. I believe it. You're not the only one confused. Harry did not evade this ready excuse. He heard Nick continue, but, Harry, even though I am the ghost of Gryffindor, I cannot speak ill of Professor Slytherin behind his back, even if he is born in Slytherin. Neither can Professor Heimer. But I can tell you that Professor Heimer is a very remarkable person, and the words I said at the opening dinner were not just derogatory. Just wait patiently. I guess you'll understand what I mean by Christmas. Christmas? Harry could only return to the dormitory in doubt. What can Professor Heimer do at Christmas? Does this mean he will be chosen as the most popular professor? This didn't seem impossible. Harry had long noticed that the students' evaluation of Professor Heimer had changed, especially the fully automatic magic wand. Even he himself was deeply attracted by this idea. In addition, Professor Heimer's discipline has indeed become much more relaxed recently. Well, the devil won't really become the most popular person, right? Christmas is coming, and everyone is eagerly looking forward to the holiday. There is a cold wind in the corridors, especially in the underground classrooms, where a cloud of white mist forms when you breathe. The potions class was held in the underground classroom, and Malfoy began to mock Harry again, saying that the reason why he stayed at Hogwarts for Christmas was because his family didn't want him. Harry subconsciously countered, but some people can go home just because they didn't break their necks. He finally found a way to deal with Malfoy. As soon as the flying lesson was mentioned, Malfoy would be so angry that he could say nothing. Because the person who saved Malfoy happened to be Harry Potter. Harry didn't feel too burdened by this, but Malfoy was different. Ron looked at Malfoy's angry face and sighed, you can use this trick against him for the rest of your life. Harry looked very proud. When they left the underground classroom after class, they found that the corridor in front of them was blocked by a large fir tree. When they saw the two big feet sticking out from under the tree and heard the loud huffing sound, they knew. That one behind the tree must be Hagrid. Need help? Ron asked. No, I can do it. Thank you, Ron. Can you move out of the way? Malfoy's cold, drawled voice came from behind them. Want to make some pocket money, Weasley? You. Professor Hammer. Ron suddenly shouted loudly, startling Malfoy. When he turned around, he found that Professor Highmore had really arrived. Malfoy immediately left in despair. He knew which professor was the most untouchable. Toby was carrying the shovel, and Al also took out his own small shovel. Hello. Toby greeted with a smile and seemed to be in a good mood. Hagrid, hasn't the snow on the path in the Forbidden Forest been swept away yet? Not yet. It's several feet deep. It will probably take a while. It won't take that long. I'll help you clear the snow now. Just clearing the snow. Hagrid looked at Toby suspiciously. I have heard from the centaurs that they can always meet you in the Forbidden Forest. Are you not messing around? How is that possible? Toby inadvertently glanced at the eavesdropping little wizards. What are you still doing here? Do you want to follow me to the Forbidden Forest? Or have you already finished your homework? Harry and the three of them ran away quickly, fearing that they would be a step too late. Ron said with some frustration, Oops, Professor Heimer can use this method to deal with us for the rest of his life. One day later, the Christmas vacation finally began, and Hermione handed the two of them a book list. She was going home, so she could only give them the task of finding Nick Flamel. But Harry and Ron were having so much fun. There were a lot fewer people in the common room, allowing them to occupy more comfortable armchairs and play wizard chess by the fire. However, Harry's level was not that good. In this way, he was often beaten to a pulp by Ron. On Christmas Eve, the collection boxes in the common room were gone, and the remaining students knew they would be counting down their most popular professors tomorrow. At the same time, Toby patted the white snow on his body and walked back to the castle, and Al's body was also dyed white by the snowflakes. Principal Dumbledore was standing at the gate of the castle to greet them. He waved his wand, causing the snowflakes on their bodies to disperse, and a wave of heat swept through their bodies. It seems that you had a lot of fun during the holiday. Dumbledore said calmly, I hope the centaurs won't come to me to complain again. They won't. Toby vowed, the snow in the Forbidden Forest is so deep that they can't even find out where we are. The corner of Dumbledore's mouth twitched, you know what I mean, but, forget it. It's time to announce the results tomorrow. Where is the collection box? Toby took the principal to his office, and the 4 collection boxes were neatly placed on the desk. But Toby did not open the collection box immediately, but said, I said, Principal, this is a collection box. A Christmas present. A Christmas gift for everyone. Dumbledore looked at Toby, a smile gradually appeared on his face. Severus will be very angry, he will think that you have played a trick on him. Maybe I'm happy too. Toby said nonchalantly. The defense against the dark arts professor's dormitory. Throughout the night before Christmas Eve, Quirrell was too nervous to sleep. He felt that his mind was dizzy, as if he had a high fever. He waited in a daze until dawn, dozing off countless times, and as soon as he opened his eyes, he looked at the foot of his bed. Among the meager packages, there was an envelope sitting there. Quirrell couldn't wait to open the envelope, took out the letter paper and read it. It read, Professor Quirinus Quirrell, congratulations on becoming the most popular professor at Hogwarts, Merry Christmas. Quirrell read the letter several times. He rubbed his eyes vigorously and read it several times again. He was right, he really became the most popular professor, he did it. Quirrell wanted to laugh and cry for a moment. But all the emotions turned into deep fear in the end. Master, Master! Quirrell asked fearfully. He watched helplessly as his body suddenly lost control, and his arm stretched out towards the wand, aiming it at his head. Lord, everything is forgotten. When the light flashed, Quirrell's expression suddenly became confused, and the letter in his hand turned into black ash. Stupid wretch! Chapter 55. Merry Christmas, Harry Potter. There was only this sentence written on the small note. Harry turned the note over, but he didn't find out who the candidate for the most popular professor was. There was only one signature left on the envelope, Hogwarts' most popular professor. The results of it. Harry still remembered what Sir Nicholas, the Gryffindor ghost, had said to him. He would understand what it meant by Christmas. But what does this mean? Harry didn't get it at all. Ron also woke up, saw the package at the foot of the bed, and opened the letter addressed to him. Harry looked over and saw that there were no final voting results on it, only a sentence similar to "Merry Christmas, Ron Weasley." The two people exchanged glances. "I understand," Ron said suddenly. "What do you understand?" Harry asked in surprise. "I understand why Professor Heimer did this," Ron said thoughtfully. "Percy didn't let me tell others what I said. He said that Professor Heimer probably didn't receive a Christmas gift when he was in school. Gifts, at least for 1 year. That's why the professor thought of giving everyone a Christmas gift, and this is." Ron raised the note in his hand, "A blessing from the most popular professor. Although I don't know who it is still quite creative. This should be considered by the professor for the students who cannot receive the gift. Maybe other professors. Or, for example, Professor Binns, who would give a Christmas gift to a ghost." Wait. Harry suddenly became as stammering as Quirrell, and he quickly asked, "Why haven't you said these things before?" "Because Percy thinks this is Professor Heimer's scandal." Ron shrugged and said, "For our safety reasons, it is not convenient to publicize it. Oh, by the way, there is one more thing. We don't know who is going to host it. It was a teacher recognition event, but the gift proposal was indeed proposed by Professor Heimer himself, and this was what he told us personally during the interview." Harry was silent, feeling his heart heavy. From Ron's perspective, not receiving a Christmas gift was unimaginable, but Harry didn't think so. He has lived like this since he was a child. Even before he woke up this morning, he never thought he would receive a Christmas present. Ron had already opened the package excitedly and saw a dark purple sweater. "Oh, it's a sweater unique to the Weasley family." His tone was a little helpless, and then he turned to look at the motionless Harry and asked, "What are you thinking about?" Harry came back from his daze, opened a paper package without interest, and muttered in a low voice, "I seem to understand why Nick said that." "Nick? Nick Flamel's Nick? Do you know who Nick Flamel is?" "No, it's nearly Headless Nick. I came to him specifically once to ask about Professor Heimer." "Wait, what is this?" Harry looked at the silver-grey liquid-like cloth in the paper bag in confusion, and Ron gasped. "It's an invisibility cloak." He lowered his voice and said. Harry soon found an unsigned letter in the invisibility cloak. "Your father left this thing to me before he died. It should be returned to you now. Use it well. Sincerely wish you a Merry Christmas. == On the other side, Toby, who was spreading blessings, had not had time to check his Christmas gifts. He was not even in his office. Instead, he and Al were sitting next to a small bonfire, holding 2 bunches of cotton, one large and one small. Sugar, roasting on the fire. Near them was a deserted land of ice and snow, and the sun had just risen. "Ah!" As Al said this, he put the roasted marshmallow into his mouth, and his mouth was stuck from top to bottom. Toby opened the suitcase at his feet, took out a hot teapot from it, poured the steaming tea into the teacup, handed it to Al, and said at the same time, "At noon, isn't there a Christmas dinner at noon? Keep going. We'll go back in a while, and it won't work if we don't go back. The Forbidden Forest in winter is really too torturous." Both of them have gone deep into the Forbidden Forest. The Forbidden Forest that Professor Kettleben spent half his life exploring is far from being as simple as it seems from the edge. For this reason, Toby and Al have not returned to the castle for many days. But this gave them a good look at the so-called Forbidden Forest, especially when night came. Last night, Toby suspected that the huge figure passing by the tent was not a troll, but a giant, or something else huge. Fantastic animals. This morning Toby also saw a snitch from a distance. There was no golden snitch in the old Quidditch game. It was a creation made by wizards later. It looked for the ball in the original Quidditch game. The players are chasing magical animals like golden snitchet. This is really unbelievable, because the snitch is already on the verge of extinction. Unfortunately, Toby only blinked and the snitch flew out of sight, and the speed was no slower than the golden snitch. After sharing the little remaining tea, Toby put out the bonfire, took out the shiny silver shovel from the suitcase and put it on his shoulder, letting Al lead the way. There are many strange things in the Forbidden Forest, but unfortunately there are not many useful discoveries. In many cases, in order to avoid getting into trouble, Toby can only stay away from it, but this is no different from his previous archaeology. Many ancient ruins. The dangers are countless, and if they all come together, they will all be gone. The location where they are now is a hillside, and there are many mountains deep in the Forbidden Forest, otherwise there would be no mountain troll species. The surrounding trees are still lush, and although the leaves have withered, it is still a scene that blocks the sky and the sun. Al circled around a tree several times, sniffed his nose vigorously, and suddenly found a spot and pointed. Toby threw the shovel on his shoulder, and the shovel seemed to suddenly come to life, digging a medium-sized deep hole in the snow without anyone using it. After the big shovel stopped waving, Al took out the small shovel and threw it away. The small shovel automatically continued digging. Al stayed in the pit, carefully swept the frozen soil with his paws, and then happily picked up a silver coin. Seco. It's probably left by the missing students again. Toby said in disappointment that many people have disappeared in the Forbidden Forest over the years, but he did not come to the Forbidden Forest to pick up money. After Al put Sicko in his belly pocket, Toby took out a complicated-looking device from the suitcase. It looked like a top, but it had several thin, curved legs growing from the bottom. After the top landed, its thin legs began to flop around and walk around. Toby and Al waited patiently. The top walked around the pit a few times, and then suddenly stopped under a tree trunk. It suddenly shouted, "Get rich! Get rich! Good luck!" Toby happily said that usually the spinning top would only yell insignificant, "Poor guy! Poor guy!" and the like. It is not easy to find ancient ruins in the Forbidden Forest, because the Forbidden Forest is really too big. Toby can only ask Al to look for property and the like first, and then let Gyro search carefully nearby, which is a bit like a collision. Look! The two shovels began to swing one after another again, and Toby and Al each took out a pair of telescopes of suitable size and put them against their eyes, looking into the deeply dug hole. I don't know how deep the foreign objects in the ground are buried, but for a location like the Forbidden Forest, the deeper the better, which means it's very old. After the shovels stopped swinging, Toby took out a simple straw doll from the suitcase. Al also took out his own little flying carpet and let the doll sit on the flying carpet and get into the hole. After a while, the flying carpet flew back to the two of them. Toby picked up the doll and took a closer look, and found that the expression on the doll's face was still smiling. This meant that there was no danger underground for the time being, and nothing terrible would happen. Something comes out, such as a mummy that cannot be killed. So the shovels started swinging again, and this time the digging time was extra long. Al had already set up an extra bonfire near the entrance of the cave, toasting slices of bread out of boredom. Only Toby was left staring at the progress deep inside the hole. His eyes never left the telescope for a moment. "Thanks." Toby took the toasted bread from Al and said, "It's pitch dark underground, but both shovels are emitting silver light, so there's no need to worry about the light source." "Wait a moment!" Toby suddenly shouted, and the shovels in the distance stopped immediately as if they heard what he said. Toby twisted the outer ring of the telescope and looked carefully at the traces dug by the shovels. It looked like a stone platform, and the surface was covered with strange carvings. Toby recognized them as ancient runes. In addition, there is a small groove on the stone platform. If Toby saw it correctly, the groove fits perfectly with the pensieve in the principal's office, as if they were originally a pair. It has something to do with the pensieve. Toby couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth. What a perfect Christmas gift! Chapter 56. After being notified, Principal Dumbledore quickly came to the depths of the Forbidden Forest. When he rushed to Toby's location, Toby had already dug out the stone base from the depths of the ground and placed it near the entrance of the cave. "Headmaster." As soon as Dumbledore appeared, Toby walked over in surprise. He seemed to want to hug the principal, but Dumbledore forced him back with his eyes. Toby had no choice but to stop and pretend to be careful and scared. Dumbledore sighed helplessly, Toby, forget it, where is the base you mentioned? If we solve it quickly. If so, we still have time to attend the Christmas banquet." Obviously, even Principal Dumbledore can't do anything about Toby's hobby, and it's impossible for Toby to steal the pensieve without telling Principal Dumbledore, unless he doesn't want to do it at Hogwarts. "Here." Toby excitedly walked to the pedestal. Principal Dumbledore walked back and forth around the pedestal several times, carefully looking at the ancient runes engraved on it. "It does look very similar." The principal commented, "It does seem to be a pair with the pensieve." He took out his wand and waved it hard, and the pensieve appeared out of thin air. Toby quickly caught the stone basin. The two looked at each other. Dumbledore was not going to waste time, so Toby carefully placed the stone basin on the groove on the top of the base. Dumbledore raised his wand and was secretly on guard. Al, who climbed onto the principal's shoulder, opened his eyes wide at the moment when the pensieve and the base were connected. The ancient runes engravings shone slightly. Then, more appeared on all sides of the base. Runes, but the runes that appear this time are no longer related to the functions of magical creations, but lines of text that can be read. Toby had taken a prerequisite course in ancient runes, and he translated the text. The bravery of the swamp. The beauty of a tranquil riverside. The mercy of the open valley. Shrewdness in the cold mire. As well as foresight of a lush forest. After reading these 5 lines of text, Toby was silent for a long time, feeling as if his heart was surging, as if he had discovered something extraordinary. It's really remarkable. There is no doubt that bravery corresponds to Godric Gryffindor, beauty corresponds to Rowena Ravenclaw, kindness corresponds to Helga Hufflepuff, and shrewdness corresponds to Sasha Ratcha Slytherin. But now, the origin of the 5th unknown person appears on the pedestal, the vision of a lush forest. Even Principal Dumbledore's expression became solemn, his light blue eyes revealing thoughts and memories. He suddenly told a rumor. It is said that the pensieve was once buried at the site where Hogwarts was founded. It has a history older than Hogwarts. It was a creation from a distant era. It was later acquired by the founders and passed down from generation to generation for Hogwarts. Used by the principals of CI. Then the pedestal may have been built later. Toby expressed his guess, and the words on the pedestal are actually engraved with history, and they are also witnesses of the discovery of the pensieve. The first witness. The answer is already apparent. Before Hogwarts was established, there were 5 original witnesses. Toby's eyes shone brightly, and he suddenly looked at Principal Dumbledore. It's a centaur. He suddenly babbled, don't the centaurs always say that this is their forbidden forest? But the forbidden forest appeared next to Hogwarts, and the base happened to be buried deep in the forbidden forest. The 5th witness was a centaur, and Slytherin was not the first founder to part ways, the centaur was. The centaur named Foresight. This makes sense. The centaurs are already good at divination magic, whether it is observing the stars or their methods of burning herbs. Foresight can just become the code name of the centaurs. Why is it that the centaur named Foresight refuses to found Hogwarts and instead comes to the forbidden forest? It's not coming. Dumbledore corrected, it's the same creation, but the centaurs created the forbidden forest. This place was indeed planted from saplings by the centaurs. Principal Dumbledore's statement confirmed Toby's guess that there was indeed a 5th founder. You and Al should go back to the castle first. Dumbledore ordered, it is more appropriate for me to take over the remaining work. Toby did not refuse. The remaining work had to be done with the centaurs, but the centaurs were very vigilant, and Foresight deliberately hid the base deep underground in order to prevent others from discovering him. The connection with the wizards may even have fallen out with the 4 founders. It is definitely safer for Principal Dumbledore to come forward. The centaurs respected Principal Dumbledore, but their attitude towards Toby was not so friendly, especially when he came to dig holes in the Forbidden Forest again and again. Many times, Toby had an affair with a centaur named Bane. There was a quarrel, and the other party was very angry and thought Toby was hurting the forest. Toby returned to the castle in a relaxed mood and walked back to his office. There were already piles of Christmas gifts at the foot of his bed, including several roaring letters. However, Toby had obviously foreseen this. He wrote a letter on the envelope. When I saw Angela's name, I simply flicked my wand and the letter burned, leaving no trace behind. Toby rummaged through the pile of gifts with great anticipation, and finally found what he was looking for: a small bottle of Felixir, a gift from Professor Slughorn. The amount of Felixir is not large, and it is probably only enough for one person to use for 2 hours, but Toby knows how difficult it is usually. It takes more than half a year to brew Felixir. Professor Raghorn probably started refining the potion after Toby left, and he didn't waste any time, so he was able to give this thoughtful gift in advance. It looks like I need to add a few more paragraphs to the special acknowledgements. Toby smiled and asked Al to put the small bottle into his belly pocket. They came to the auditorium where the banquet was about to begin, and the professors greeted Toby enthusiastically. They all received the special Christmas gift in each professor's letter. They were the most beloved ones at Hogwarts. Welcome, Professor. Why isn't Professor Quirrell here? Toby asked curiously. He is not feeling well. Professor McGonagall replied, don't worry, he has already drank the potion to treat the cold. Poor Quirrell has become increasingly thin recently. Little by little, students also poured into the auditorium, and finally Principal Dumbledore came back. He easily pulled Toby from Snape to the seat next to him. After announcing that the banquet had officially begun, he whispered. The Centaurs also don't know about the existence of the Seers. They have never heard of the fifth founder. Toby nodded with twinkling eyes. It seems that the people the Seer wants to hide are not only wizards, but also centaurs. The centaurs named the Seers hid the centaurs from future generations, another confusing history. What an interesting discovery. Chapter 57. It's quiet at night. Harry listened to the sound of Ron sleeping soundly. He quietly leaned out of the bed, took out the invisibility cloak from under the bed, and stared at it. This is his father's, so use the invisibility cloak well. Harry put the invisibility cloak on himself, and his figure was completely invisible in the mirror. Use it well. Suddenly, Harry suddenly woke up. Putting on this invisibility cloak, the entire Hogwarts was completely open to him. He could go anywhere. Harry glanced at the sleeping Ron and did not choose to wake him up. This is his father's invisibility cloak. It is also Harry's first time to use the invisibility cloak. He wants to use it alone. He tiptoed out of the dormitory, walked down the stairs, walked through the common room, crawled through the portrait hole, and came out of the corridor. Harry already had a plan. He was going to look for clues about Nick Flamel in the restricted book area, where students were usually not allowed to read without permission, but it was different now, no one could find him. The library was dark and eerie. Harry lit a lamp and carried it through the rows of bookshelves. The restricted book area was at the back of the library. Harry carefully stepped over the rope that separated these books from the rest of the collection, held up the light and read the titles. However, he couldn't get a clue from the titles. The peeling, faded gilt letters spelled out words that Harry couldn't understand. Some of the books didn't even have names. Ah! Keep your voice down, Al. Harry froze suddenly. It was the voice of Professor Heimer and Mr. Al. They were also in the library late at night and were walking towards the restricted book area. Harry quickly blew out the lamp and quickly put his palm back into the invisibility cloak. Just as he was about to run away, he accidentally burned his wrist on the hot lamp. Oh! Harry quickly suppressed the sound of pain, and cold sweat suddenly covered his back. Not far in front of him, Professor Heimer stopped, his eyes hidden behind his long hair. Under the shroud of darkness, Professor Heimer seemed more like a devil. Hey! Al on his shoulder called out in confusion. Toby's frown gradually relaxed. It's nothing. He said, Mrs. Pants should not come to the library to patrol at night. She drank so much during the day and should be sleeping now. Harry watched Professor Heimer pass by him without raising any suspicion, which made him sigh in relief. But Toby's explanation aroused Harry's curiosity. And, to be honest, Harry always felt that Professor Heimer looked very skillful. He even wore an extra pair of gloves and seemed to have sneaked into the forbidden book area more than once. Harry struggled for a while, and he thought it would be good to wait a little longer. This was one of the few opportunities for him to approach Professor Heimer secretly, not to mention that Professor Heimer seemed a bit sneaky. In fact, since receiving the special Christmas gift this morning, Harry no longer doubts Professor Heimer so much. He can completely understand Professor Heimer's intention. Before that, Harry never thought that he would accept the gift. Get a Christmas gift. However, Snape did not seem to be satisfied with this during the banquet. Before Principal Dumbledore called Professor Heimer away, Harry saw that Snape's face was not good looking, which actually made Harry feel very happy. But Professor Heimer was still too suspicious. This only related to his own behavior. Harry always felt that Professor Heimer was incompatible with the style of other professors at Hogwarts, of course, except during class. Professor Heimer was still very strict. Even after the interview, he only became more friendly, but his harshness did not change much. Harry moved quietly. He already thought that Professor Heimer would not be able to find him, so his movements became bolder, wanting to see what book Professor Heimer planned to read. However, Professor Heimer's movements were very subtle. Every time he took out a book, he hid it in his arms. Just as Harry was hesitating whether to get closer, he heard Professor Heimer and Mr. Al say, "It's time." Hey! Al raised his head in confusion. It's time to break the seal. Harry was horrified to see a black-red flame suddenly surge from Professor Heimer's body, sharp horns sprouted from his head, his height suddenly rose, his face turned blood-like red, and his teeth became pointy. Exposed outside the mouth. Devil! Professor Heimer is really a devil! Ah! Harry let out a shrill scream and ran out without looking back. He only felt that the devil was still laughing behind him, chasing him. At the same time, the magic ball floated back to Toby silently, and he walked towards Harry's running footsteps. Is it Harry Potter? I didn't expect that there was actually someone else in the library. Did he use the invisibility cloak? Toby listened to the continuous screams in the corridor, as if someone was being tortured. Did I go too far in scaring him? Ah! Forget it, this experience is probably enough for him to have nightmares for a few nights, so I won't deduct points for now. I will seize the time to look for books related to the centaurs. I knew that the principal would definitely find nothing. The centaurs. The historical heritage is not as good as Hogwarts. It doesn't even have a decent library. They spend all day looking at the stars and looking at the stars without revealing anything. These centaurs are really stupid. Ah! You ask me why I have to come to the forbidden book area at night? Of course it's because Mrs. Pants is not that easy to deal with. She was very important to these books when I was in school, and she was not only interested in the students, but even the principal. It is difficult to borrow some books. I saw the principal wanted to borrow a copy of Muggles Through Time, and ended up having to pry open every finger of Mrs. Pants. Later, Mrs. Pants even did it in front of the principal. Wrote a warning, the consequences of mistreating this book will be as dire as her ability to create it. In Mrs. Pants's opinion, these books are more important than the authority of the principal. Yes, I am talking about Principal Dumbledore. But the scene at the time was really funny. I doubt that Mrs. Pants could help it. Use a feather duster to drive away the principal. Oh, the principal. Toby's expression was as stiff as Harry's, and Al quickly concealed his laughter, but his belly still trembled. In the slanting moonlight, Principal Dumbledore slowly appeared, staring at Toby calmly. Is this the disillusionment curse? Toby quickly praised, it's more powerful than Harry Potter's invisibility cloak. I didn't hear your footsteps at all, but it is definitely necessary to borrow books in this way. It's much easier, I guess you won't have to pry off Mrs. Pants's fingers later. 5 minutes later, Dumbledore brought Toby, who had a bulging forehead, with a smile to another empty classroom. Al's pendant was successfully used without any punishment. Chapter 58. That's not fair. Toby murmured in a low voice, and Al chuckled. But Toby didn't complain for too long. He saw a very majestic mirror in this classroom, reaching the height of the ceiling, with a gorgeous golden frame, and 2 claw-shaped feet supporting it underneath. It is the mirror of Archaeologist, which can reveal the deepest desires of the human heart. Shall we start now, Principal? Toby asked. The final mechanism is fully arranged. Dumbledore said nothing, but there was a rush of footsteps in the corridor. Toby recognized that it was Harry's footsteps. Hide us, Dumbledore ordered. The light of the magic circle flashed, and the 3 figures disappeared immediately. The next second, Harry quietly walked into the house and found the mirror of Archaeologist. He had just escaped the pursuit of Snape and Filch, but he did not see the devilish figure of Professor Heimer. Now he has gradually come back to his senses. He remembered that Professor Heimer was there in the first ancient magic class. A fantasy was transformed. In this way, Professor Heimer's devil is very likely to be fake. But the unfortunate thing is that Harry was definitely discovered by Professor Heimer, so the other party would scare him like this. This made Harry even more worried. He would rather Professor Heimer was really a devil than be punished. Just when Harry was feeling distressed about this, he inadvertently glanced at the mirror opposite and almost screamed. There were at least a dozen people standing behind him in the mirror. Harry quickly checked, but there was no one behind him. He saw the woman standing behind her in the mirror smiling and waving to him, and the tall, thin man with black hair standing next to her put his arms around her. Harry got closer and closer to the mirror. Dad? Mom? He asked. Harry looked at his family in the mirror, unwilling to even blink. Hidden Toby watched this scene quietly. Al sat on his shoulder and dozed off. It wasn't until there was a sound in the distance that Harry realized that he couldn't stay in this room for long. I will come again. He whispered, then hurriedly left the room. After the door was closed, the 3 figures reappeared. Al had already fallen into a deep sleep, and the other 2 people also deliberately lowered their voices to talk so as not to wake it up. You seem to think highly of this boy, Headmaster. Is there anything you can say to me? Other than playing charades? Sorry, Toby. No need to apologize, as long as you don't stop me from going to the Forbidden Forest again in the future. In my opinion, the identity of the fifth founder is far more important than the boy who lived. If you insist, remember to respect the centaurs, that's what they value most. Of course, Principal, of course. Toby slowly moved Al onto the flying carpet, floated beside him, and then walked towards the door. Just before leaving, he turned around and saw himself in the mirror. The past was nothing worth remembering. He looked at himself in the mirror and said, then turned and left the classroom. Dumbledore, who was left alone, also walked to the mirror. He sighed deeply, revealing his feelings of powerlessness and aging. He said to himself in the mirror, "Death is not terrible. Equals 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 equals." No matter what, Harry was still frightened by Professor Hammer. Early the next morning, Ron, who learned what had happened, took Harry into the auditorium. He continued to talk about his experience in confinement. Don't look around or touch around, you know the sea. How scary is the collection in Professor Mo's office? Stop talking. Harry suddenly interrupted. Professor Heimer was walking towards them in the teacher's seat. Harry watched with fear as he got closer and closer to him, and finally stopped in front of the two of them. Have you finished your homework? Toby asked. It's done. Harry was so nervous that he almost screamed. We finished the ancient magic homework on the first day of vacation. Very good. Toby smiled with satisfaction, then turned to look at Ron. Thank you for Mrs. Weasley's gift for me. It's a very creative sweater. Al also likes it. Al has already put on the sweater gift given by Mrs. Weasley. It is a black and red one. Her workmanship is very exquisite, and Al wears it very well. This was sent by Mrs. Weasley to thank Toby for helping Bill. Oh, no problem, Professor. Ron nodded quickly in agreement. They watched Toby take Al out of the auditorium, and Harry couldn't believe it. He really let me go. Ron held his chin and said, it seems that Professor Heimer is always very tolerant of outstanding students. How about we work harder to learn magic circles, just like Hermione? Good idea, but we have to wait until breakfast is over first. After finishing breakfast, the two of them patted their bulging bellies and looked at each other guiltily. Want to play wizard chess? What about Nick Flamel? What about ancient magic? Well, let's talk after we finish playing wizard chess? Just play for a while. All right. They sat by the fireplace in the common room and had a good fight. After a while, Fred and George appeared. Want to have a snowball fight? We'll deal with you two, and we can also give you Percy. Percy, who was studying, had already changed into the sweater of the Weasley family. He said without raising his head, I'm not going. Also, please keep your voice down and don't disturb me at. Let go. Let me go quickly. Fred and George lifted Percy up, and Ron and Harry looked at each other again. Want to go? How about, go? Well, then go. So they played from morning to noon, and after dinner they played until afternoon, forgetting all about study and Nico Flamel. It wasn't until they met Professor Heimer again that they recalled the magic circle. However, Professor Heimer was walking outside the castle in the afternoon and didn't pay much attention to them. What is Professor Heimer going to do? I don't know, maybe it's going to Hogsmeade. Hogsmeade? What is that place? Bang! Bang! The snowball hit Harry and Ron, and Percy was fighting against Fred and George alone. He shouted angrily, come and help quickly, don't be in a daze. I must teach them two a lesson today. Boom! Percy was also hit by a snowball. On the other side, Toby was walking on the snow outside the castle with Al. They passed the station and walked into Hogsmeade Village. There is still a Christmas atmosphere here. Toby turned left and right on the street, and finally came to a small bar on a small road. A tattered wooden sign hung on a rusty bracket on the door, with a picture painted on it. The wild boar's head was chopped off, and the blood stains penetrated the white cloth wrapping it. As Toby approached, the sign creaked in the wind. This is the Pig's Head Bar. It's also a place that Weech said would have many interesting guests. Chapter 59. Toby took Al into the Hog's Head Bar, which was small, dark, and very dirty. Thick dirt accumulated on the several bay windows, and almost no light could penetrate. There were some candles burning on the rough wooden tables. This place is really dirty. Toby frowned and said, it's far worse than the Vale Bar. Al also fanned his nose exaggeratedly, and the whole bar exuded a strong smell of mutton. The bar owner sidled out of a back door. He was a grumpy-looking old man, tall and thin with a lot of long grey hair and a beard. Toby looked at the boss carefully, and the boss was staring at him impatiently, waiting for him to take his order. A glass of devil's gin and a glass of hot milk. 8 sickles. Al took money out of his pocket to pay the bill, and took out 2 clean cups that had been prepared in advance. This was Professor Flitwick's suggestion, and judging from the environment of the bar, this was indeed a very practical suggestion. Devil's gin is a dark red wine with bubbles that resemble small skulls and looks like a glass of lava. Toby found a secluded corner with 2 cups in his hands, his hair drooping down little by little, hiding it from his eyes, and he occasionally took a small sip unhurriedly. Al held the hot milk without saying anything. From time to time he took out a BB multi-flavor bean from his belly pocket and put it in his mouth. If it tasted good, he would smash it in his mouth. If it tasted bad, he would quickly drink a big sip of the hot milk. Swallow the milk. Toby also came to the Pig's Head bar to try his luck this time. It is not easy to find traces of the 5th founder. Many records in the school are incomplete. The 2 Goblin rebellions alone have completely destroyed Hogwarts. It was affected a lot, especially the First Rebellion, which was even a war involving the entire British wizarding world. Hogwarts also lost a lot of information in similar wars, including library books. After all, not every headmaster has Dumbledore's abilities. As for asking about the ghosts in the school, Toby knew that Bloody Barrow was one of the first batch of students, but the 5th founder was earlier than that. According to Barrow, the Forbidden Forest was there before he entered the school. Already exists. Time passed little by little, and guests in the bar came and went. Not every guest was as naked as Toby. Some were covered with bandages, and some simply covered their heads with cloth bags. There were also many guests who came to talk to him, but Toby drove away all the unreliable guests. He was not that easy to deceive. Before he became an ace curse breaker, he started out as an ordinary curse breaker bit by bit. Yes, the goblins at that time didn't take him seriously. The sun tilted down little by little, leaving only dim candlelight in the bar. A customer with something hidden in his arms sat quietly opposite Toby. Toby remembered that the other person had also been sitting in the bar for a long time, with a hood on his head. His face was shrouded in dark smoke. I have something to sell, he said as soon as he came up. His voice was hoarse and obviously disguised. Toby stared at him and tapped the table with his fingers. The man understood immediately and lifted up a corner of his robe, revealing something like a sculpture underneath. Toby narrowed his eyes slightly. The thing in the other person's arms looked very much like a centaur. This is not easy to get, because it is too rare. The centaurs have not had much contact with wizards, and they themselves have no habit of building sculptures. I used a shrinking spell. The mysterious guest continued in a low voice, it is about 10 times the original size. Toby made an assessment in his mind. From this point of view, the original shape of the sculpture was about the same size as the centaur. He nodded inadvertently and tapped the table with his fingers twice. Al also stopped eating multi-flavor beans and stared at the other party with his dark little eyes. The mysterious guest obviously didn't take one sniff to heart, and after a while he stretched out a 4th one. Toby shook his head and said disdainfully, 400 galleons, you really dare to ask for it? You can exchange it for information. The mysterious guest added, I know you, Tobyheimer, and I have also read your book, Ancient Magic. I need specific information about a place in the book. Toby did not hide his face, so it was not surprising that the other party recognized him. There were many goblins in Gringotts in various countries who knew him. Tell me, where is it? Ghost Castle, or Death Castle, whatever you want to call it, you should know where I am referring to. I heard that there are many weapons and armors made by goblins there, and no one can take them out, but I did it. Yes, there are indeed many lost creations of goblins in the castle. They are a lot of wealth. Since you want to die, I won't stop you. Let's start trading. You bring the pen of truth. Bring it. The mysterious guest took out a blue quill, which was made from the feathers of the silent bird. It also had the function of making veritaserum. Only the true thoughts in the heart could be written on paper. Toby took the pen of truth and wrote a series of messages on the parchment handed to him, all written in ancient runes. I hope you have taken this class. Toby handed over the parchment and quill, and the mysterious guest took it and looked at it carefully. Not sure if he understood it, he put the sculpture in his arms on the table and left the bar without saying a word. Walking very fast. Toby slowly drank the last bit of wine, and Al took this time to take out a bag made of silver cloth, put the centaur sculpture in the bag, and finally tied the rope tightly and put it back in his belly pocket. Let's go. Toby stood up. Al jumped on his shoulders and put on the half-moon glasses. A trace that only the glasses could see immediately appeared in front of his eyes, like a purple ribbon. This is the aroma of algae, a herbal species that even Dean Sprout doesn't know about. It is only found in Loch Ness City. Toby guessed that it was a sign used by the wizards in the city to identify the residents of the city. As for Al's glasses, 2 medium-sized magic circles were emitting a subtle light on the lenses. If you were a little further away, you wouldn't be able to see this light. It would be fine if it was just a sculpture of a centaur, but what the other party asked about was Death Castle. How could there be so many coincidences? The armor that replaced Lu Wei's guard role was brought back from the Death Castle by Toby. Once they left the bar, Toby's footsteps disappeared. The magic ball cast a magic circle in an instant. This time it did not emit any light, but in the next second, even Toby and Al disappeared into the street. They followed the traces of the skeletal algae and came to a secluded alley. The other party stood upright at the end of the alley without any cover, with his back to the invisible Toby and Al. But Toby suddenly stopped. He stared at the back cautiously, as if the other person had long expected that Toby would not let him go. The mysterious guest slowly turned around, took off the hood of his witch robe, and his face became clear in the moonlight. Mundungus Fletcher, one of the members of the Order of the Phoenix, said with a painful expression, "Mr. Hammer, save me." Then he fell on his back in the snow, not knowing whether he was alive or dead. Chapter 60. Toby sent the unconscious Mundungus to the school hospital. Madame Pomfrey rushed over. She was startled by Mundungus foaming at the mouth. "Who is this man? What happened to him? Dark magic potion, or a curse?" Toby said with a gloomy face, "There is also the Imperious Curse. Mundungus must be controlled by the Imperious Curse. Can he be saved?" "The Imperious Curse?" Madame Pomfrey realized that the situation was more critical than she thought. The Imperious Curse was one of the 3 unforgivable curses. Any wizard found using the Imperious Curse would be sent to Azkaban. The ward suddenly became very busy, and Toby also helped a lot. He also has rich experience in dealing with curses. Finally, after being fed the last dose of potion, Mundungus's face finally became much more normal, but he was still unconscious and did not wake up. The specific awakening time is not yet certain, but there should be no big problem. Ms. Pomfrey wiped the sweat from her forehead and said, "The principal's side. I have informed the principal." Toby said, "Thank you for your hard work, ma'am." Madame Pomfrey nodded and left the ward. Toby didn't leave. He had already figured out what was going on tonight. Thieves trying to steal the Sorcerer's Stone were targeting Hogwarts. Not only did the thieves know that the Sorcerer's Stone was hidden in Hogwarts, but they also knew Lu Wei was put into armor and guarded, and he was also targeted. But this mysterious thief was very cautious. The other party did not show up in person, but contacted him through Mundungus, and planned to use the news of the Death Castle to find a way to crack the armor guard. However, the other party's plan was doomed to fail. Toby had been secretly vigilant when he heard Old Castle and did not write the really key information with a true pen. But Toby still couldn't figure out one thing. He found that the parchment used for the transaction was still on Mundungus and had not been taken away by the thieves. Did the other party also expect that this time it would be in vain? That's why. Will Mundungus be given up early? But no matter what, Toby at least figured out one thing: the thief must have someone inside Hogwarts, otherwise he wouldn't know the fact that Lu Wei was replaced by armor. At this moment, 2 more people walked into the ward one after another, but none of them was Principal Dumbledore. Snape walked in front with a gloomy face, and Quirrell followed timidly behind him. They saw Toby and also saw Mundungus lying on the hospital bed. Snape's eyes tightened, while Quirrell looked startled. "You called us here at night just to let us see a patient?" Snape stared at Toby with an evil look. "He was injured by your own hands." Toby carefully observed the expressions on the faces of the 2 people. He knew that on the night when Lu Wei lost control, these 2 people were the first to appear in the corridor on the far right of the 4th floor. "I need to check your wands," Toby threatened unabashedly. "Don't make it difficult for me." I just need to use the flashback spell to see if you have cast the Imperious Curse with your own wand. Hand over your wand. Just as Toby was speaking, he had pointed his wand at the two of them, and the door to the ward was suddenly closed with force, cutting off the movement in the room. Quirrell looked frightened, and Snape's brows furrowed. Are you serious? Are you serious about bringing your bad habits to Hogwarts and randomly checking other people's wands, Toby? I'm not kidding, Severus. Just tonight, the person lying in the hospital bed almost died. The seriousness of the matter is beyond my imagination, and the thieves have set their sights on me. The Imperious Curse may be cast on me at any time, so don't force me to do it. Toby did not hide his suspicion of the two of them at all, and Snape's face was livid with anger. Quirrell stammered, Don't do this, why don't you go to Principal Dumbledore? He must have a way. I have already notified him, and he will be here soon. Toby was still staring at the two of them, and he said to himself, I believe the principal will make the same choice. Do you really think so? Snape asked. But he hasn't come yet, Toby said, sparks coming from the tip of his wand. Both of them already understood Toby's plan. He obviously decided to take action regardless of Dumbledore's obstruction, let alone the so-called consequences. This is also the reason why Dumbledore did not tell Toby about his suspicion of Quirrell, because he has always had no scruples. Take it. Snape said stiffly, throwing his wand to Toby. Quirrell could only hand over the wand tremblingly. Thank you. Toby said sincerely. He took the wands from the two of them. If there is no problem, I will apologize to you. I also hope that I will do the same after a while. Snape snorted coldly, and Quirrell showed an ugly smile. Toby raised his wand and connected it with Snape's. Pre-flashback curse. Toby yelled. A string of thick grey smoke emerged from where the two wands met, gradually forming the shape of a smiling face, like a ghost. Pleasure potion. Toby glanced at Snape. This spell was a spell that needed to be used when preparing the elation potion. Pre-flashback curse. Toby continued to shout without stopping immediately. In the next few spells, Toby saw the spells needed to prepare other potions, including demulcents, madness potions, hate potions, etc., but there was no Imperious Curse. Sorry, Severus. Toby had no choice but to say, handing the wand back to Snape and giving him a cryptic look. He originally trusted Snape more, so he checked Snape's wand in advance. This way, if Quirrell was the thief, it would be easier to join forces to subdue Quirrell. Snape took back the wand without saying a word, and deliberately rubbed it on his witch's robes, showing an expression of disgust. But he still inadvertently narrowed his eyes and held the wand in his hand, consciously or unconsciously on guard. Quirrell became visibly nervous. Pre-flashback curse. Under the gaze of three eyes, Quirrell's wand also showed the spells he had used before: the repel spell, the stun spell, the iron armor spell. It was as if Quirrell had experienced a battle not long ago. It's the troll. Quirrell quickly explained, I plan to listen to your suggestion, catch a giant monster in the Forbidden Forest, and demonstrate how to defeat the giant monster in class. Sorry, Professor Quirrell. There was also no trace of the Imperious Curse left on Quirrell's wand. Toby returned the wand to him. If you want to catch the troll, come to me. I can help. Quirrell pulled out a smile that was uglier than crying and did not answer this sentence. The suspicions of both men were eliminated, and Toby also cast a flashback spell on Mundungus' wand, but there was no trace of the Imperious Curse being used either. This is a little strange. Toby recalled the whole incident again. He failed to find out who was the source of Hogwarts, but instead called the two professors to the school hospital. Before that, Mundungus failed to pass on the news. It seemed that the thieves had no intention of obtaining useful key information from Toby from the beginning, and he was deliberately diverted. Hogwarts tonight. The defensive force has become much weaker. Oops. Toby suddenly said, the thief has probably gone to steal the magic stone. This is a rare opportunity tonight.